Live stream audio test 1 2. Station there.
Yes, thank you, sir. We're, I think we are all sorted. I think it's just a couple of technical issues about the witness.
Well, if gosh, we've got pictures galore. Welcome to my world. I can see you, Mr. Storer, I assure you. Okay, we'll press on if that's okay with you, Mr. Storer. I mean, are the technical issues sorted as far as you're concerned?
Yes, yes, I think we're quite happy. There was an earlier issue about timing, so I was just concerned, and I think this is where the confusion was, that Mr. Strudley does need to be heard today. So I was concerned if we run into all these witnesses, and I'd say just talking to Mr. Boyle, just to see how the time goes, to make sure after two of our witnesses and see how that goes, if that suits you, sir.
Let's crack on, and hopefully we can get there. But over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And this is Miss Marwood, who's a resident in Kings Road, that is the in the street that's immediately adjacent to the proposed site. Miss Marwood, could you just confirm from your evidence here that how long you've lived in Wrington, please?
Yep, I've lived in Wrington for 11 years.
And you have two small children. You walk to school on a daily basis, and therefore you're very experienced with the footways that are on this route to the school and the centre of the village.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, my two children are aged 6 and 10, and they both go to Wrington Primary School. Yeah, I walk there every day, so I am an expert at walking the roads to school. And
in your statement, it describes it, which I don't intend going over. So you've heard, or you will be able, I'm sure you'll be seen it already on your visit, and you describe when you get into Butts Batch about how there's only one footway, and we did hear evidence yesterday about the widths of these footways from one of the residents. The additional hazards in your point 5, just want to read out what some of the additional hazards are on the station road for us on those points.
Sorry, Richard, what was that? I couldn't quite hear you at the end.
It's in the point 5 onwards, where you describe the weekly refuse collection lorries add to the congestion.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the weekly refuse collection lorries add congestion along the section. There is only one footway on the west side of the carriageway. The narrow footway from Kings Road onwards means that many people with pushchairs or people who use wheelchairs will use that carriageway. Even when it's clear of vehicles, the footway is hard to manage for disabled persons due to the uneven nature of it. How far do you want me to go up on the witness statement, or would you like me to expand on any of it?
So you do describe where there was an original bus stop was moved from further south in Butts Batch, and that is still cut out. And just to there's now a new bus stop, but in paragraph 11, if you can just explain that as well, please.
Okay, the residents and visitors from Butts Batch and Kings Road often park on the footway out of necessity, as the carriageway is too narrow for large vehicles to pass. And I have made the point about BT vans who work at the exchange box, which is just at the bottom of Kings Road. It's on Butts Batch on the left when you leave Kings Road. And when BT workers are there, they have to put a barrier around them so that you walk into the road around them. And the vans for BT park up along Butts Batch going south when you leave, Kings Road. And cars are quite frequently parked all the way along Butts Batch. because you can't get a bus or any large vehicles down the main carriageway, so they park up onto the pavement and you have to walk with your buggy or wheelchair around the road to carry on down Butts Batch.
And if you just describe, as you walk towards Railway Wharf, where there is no footway, if you just describe your experience, what it's like and your experiences you've had there, please.
Yeah, sure. So when I leave Kings Road and I walk north, crossing Westwood Close and then reaching Railway Wharf, there are no dropped curbs to cross there. You sometimes, so for example, if you kind of leave the road and get onto the road, where Westwood Close is, if there are cars parked in the parking bays on Westwood Close, you have to walk around the edge of the road and already start walking the carriageway to walk north across Station Road, where you, to walk across to the cottages on Station Road. But if you don't have any problems with that, you just go onto the pavement there in front of the shopping arcade, and then there is a small dropped curb, which frequently has vans parked in front of it because there's a parking space. And then when you've negotiated the parked cars there, you have to wait, you look both ways. It's single carriage there because there are cars parked on the road opposite. So, and there's a blind bend as well. I think somebody described that yesterday in their evidence. There's a blind bend. So you'll stand there, you'll look both ways, wait until it's clear, start the crossing. It then takes around 17 seconds to cross diagonally from that point to where you can then act where the footpath restarts at the cottages on Station Road. And that's a very long time when you have small children. And when the cars come around, what we often find is a car will come around the bend, you're still there in the road, you've got your children, you're trying to hurry them along, and cars will either stop and wait for you, or cars will squeeze past you and your children while you're crossing the road.
Thank you. You I believe, have had experiences with the traffic.
Yeah. I have had, on a weekly basis, I would have what I would call interaction with traffic. So my description there of traffic waiting for you, perhaps waving you across whilst it's stationary in the road, that happens weekly, once or twice a week. In terms of quite serious incidents, I'm fully aware that there are no traffic, incident reports where someone has been killed, thank goodness. But I've had a few incidents just a couple of weeks ago, for example. I was walking home from school, so coming south onto that and crossing by there was two people on a bicycle. Two people on two bicycles, I should say. And they had pulled in because one of the cyclists was maybe 10, 11, 12, and her mother had obviously got quite nervous because of the volume of traffic there. So this is, bearing in mind, this is school coming home time, so it's about 3:30 in the afternoon. You have two enormous buses for the secondary school children coming that way. So she had obviously felt in danger by the fact that there were these buses coming, there was traffic waiting there, she didn't know what to do, so she'd pulled into a sort of a gap at the side. I was waiting just ahead of her to cross with my children. And then when the cars had kind of cleared, I waved her on to go first, and I thought it was safest for us to hang back. She went on, my daughter then followed off the back of them on her scooter, and a car came around the corner, and she was halfway across the road, and I had to run out and grab her and pull her back. And that was last week. I've had other incidents, similar ones when, for example, coming north, when you're leaving at Railway Wharf, I have looked out to my side like that, put my head out. There's actually a photograph in my evidence, I think, of the, I can refer to it, if you bear with me. So photograph 5 in my evidence, where it says private parking, and there is a bay tree, a bay bush on the corner. To cross the road there, you have to look around the bay tree. I have done that. A car has been coming. I've obviously deemed it unsafe to cross, so I've pulled my head back, and then the car has stopped, wound down the window, and said to my children, "You're lucky I haven't got your mother's blood on my car bonnet." I have had other incidents more recently than that one. There was one of the issues with this particular point of crossing is the fact that it becomes congested because there is only one-way traffic and because there's a blind bend. So traffic comes around the corner and enters the bend, sees a car coming, and then you know, some cars will reverse, which makes it confusing to cross when you have children, or they sort of tuck into those parking spaces if there's one available. It's a little gridlock area. So once that, we were waiting there for a good few minutes, and one of the car drivers who'd been waiting there saw us there, and so she waved us across, you know, me, my children, and some other families with us. So we crossed, but I think she expected us to cross the road directly to the houses opposite. I don't think she expected us to take 17 seconds crossing diagonally before we could then get onto the pavement on the other side. So she got impatient because 17 seconds is a very long time. I'd like to pause there for 17 seconds, but time is money. We crossed the road, she got impatient, she drove past us, and she scraped the back of my, at the time, 4-year-old daughter, and I dragged her in. The woman behind me who was crossing the road gasped in shock, and we had to stand outside of the road going, "Oh my goodness, that was so close." Doesn't get recorded, I know, but I hope you can appreciate the danger and the risk of walking and crossing at that point in the road.
Thank you for that, Mr. Marwood. I think anyone listening to that will understand just how dangerous it is. And you say that there have been no, no sort of recorded instance. What do you think would be the effect of building the proposed site and adding the increased numbers of people to the highway network, particularly in relation to Station Road and Butts Batch?
To be honest, for me, it fills me with dread and fear. I've spoken to my neighbours, I've spoken to other people, residents who use that carriageway and that footpath. It's terrifying. It is terrifying walking along there with your children. People may say to me, "Why do you do it?" Well, the alternative is for me to drive. I don't have time to drive. If anybody here has ever tried to get their children to school in the morning, you know that when you leave, it's a rush, it's a hurry. You're trying to get to school, you're probably late. This morning I was 5 minutes late and I had to drag my children down the road to get them to school. You can't drive. If you drive there, it takes longer to get there because you have to find parking at the other end and there isn't any near the school. There is no time saved by driving. It is difficult to drive there. And also, I'm an environmentally conscious person. I would like to think that when you're planning housing, you're looking at the environment, you're thinking we want to make something where it will encourage people to walk to school, it will encourage people to be healthy and fit. It will not cause people to get in their cars and drive because it's so dangerous. And that is what will happen. We heard from Ellie yesterday, Ellie Denny, my neighbour, we heard from her that she had to drive to school for 2 years because she couldn't even fit her buggy down the pavement. This is a really... sorry, I've gone off on one a little bit there, but that's how I feel about the prospect and the increase of the danger. It's only going to get worse. It's near misses at the moment. They are incidents where people feel nervous, it's risky. Yes, we do it every day because we have to. We have no choice. There are no safe, viable alternatives. And we feel like we're taking our lives into our hands every day at the end of the day, and the more traffic we get, I think that some of the figures seem to be indicating that there won't be much of an impact, but I can assure you that on a rainy day, we have 5 families in our road, King's Road. It only has 16 houses on it, and all of them get in a car and drive to school because of the rain. So I don't understand how the impact of this housing development, which is for family homes, a lot of the people, there are only 5 families on our road because a lot of people have lived there all their lives because it's a 1920s housing estate. So they've lived there for a very long time. They don't have children. These are being marketed at families. They will be using the car regularly. I'm also a bit concerned about the prospect of there being an additional bus. The heavy traffic already going through there is really difficult to navigate and dangerous. And I think there's been a suggestion that there may be a school bus to help the new residents. So I'm not particularly keen on that one either.
And thank you. And just that sort of leads us on into the photos that you have attached. And if you've got a copy there. Photo 1 shows the congestion in Station Road caused by the bin lorry. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And can you just describe what the scene shows and how that relates and causes problems for you when you're trying to walk?
Yeah, so when you've got, to be honest, this actually applies to any kind of delivery. So what we're seeing here is the refuse collection lorry, which happens every week. But we also get van deliveries parking in the middle of the road. And what happens is people wait, as you can see here, they mount the pavement on the left. At the end, well, I'm not quite sure what's going on with the silver car in front there, but perhaps they're reversing onto the pavement. But yeah, everybody goes onto the pavement on the left, and then the vehicles, any vehicle, bus for example, will squeeze through. What we find as parents with buggies is we have to either stand there and wait for the whole thing to clear, or you might find somebody is reversing out onto pavement because they've realised they're not going to be able to get through, and then you're kind of moving your children back. Sorry, I moved away from the microphone then. Then you're moving your children back out of the way as well, because you're worried they're about to get hit by a very slow-moving vehicle.
And thank you. And the photo 2, again, if you just describe what that shows, please.
Yeah, so that's the same view. It's from slightly further back, and that's again the cars. That actually demonstrates it better than the previous photo, where the cars are mounted onto the pavement behind, and they do block access. That can obviously back up, and you can't get past with your children or a wheelchair. Yeah, there are 2 large buses like that one daily. Yeah, that's right. So that's a picture taken from behind where there's some large vehicles. What it doesn't actually show, though, is that usually on the left there you can see a small car just next to the tractor, and there's normally cars parked all the way along there. I guess somebody's gone out to the shops there. But normally there's cars parked all the way along, so it's completely single file traffic through there.
And photo 4 is entitled Congestion Broad Street and Silver Street. There are sections without footway, but again, in fact, on this occasion you see both buses, school buses, in the picture, and this would be looking west, waiting to go into Station Road. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. You've already described photo 5. Thank you. And photo 6 is at. Although the buggy is coming south on this east footway, but this is where I think you earlier described, behind this blue car there's normally another car parked, but this is just to the north of the point that you cross diagonally across the road to get to the footway again. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then photo 7 is another shot of Station Road looking south on the east footway, the only footway, and just an illustration of how narrow that is. And can you, I think you've already mentioned it, but just to make, if you had, what happens on bin days?
Actually, I mean, the bin day reference is probably more relevant to photograph 6, because I believe the Baker's buildings, the bins are all put at the end of a small like driveway type thing. But along on photograph 6, where those houses go along there, people have to put their bins on the road, on the pavement, and their recycling bins. And I don't know if it's been mentioned, but on Wednesday, every alternate Wednesday, we have bin day and garden waste day and recycling day. So 4 bins are outside each house there, and we all have to go into the road to avoid the bins. I've also witnessed a woman using a wheelchair who, well, I had to move the bins for her because it was lucky because I was coming in the other direction, but she was trying to move the bins by herself because she couldn't get off the footpath to get past the bins. And another woman I've seen using a mobility scooter actually doesn't even bother using the footpaths. I've seen her going all the way along from where I described the diagonal crossing. She goes onto the road there and has to carry on going until she goes all the way past here and up to where photo 7 is, essentially, before she can get back onto the footpath. One of the issues with photo 7, which I think is highlighted here, is the fact that when you are walking down it with your pushchair, it's a long stretch of pavement, and you will regularly meet somebody coming the other way, and I have had to push my pushchair, well, angle it off the pavement. Sometimes when I've met another pushchair coming the other way, that is really, like, that happens really regularly, and it happens to, I can attest on behalf of my neighbours and friends in the village with children that happens all the time. We're always using the road.
Thank you. Just before we move on to photograph 8, so I was going to just draw your attention, because these now bring us into the document by the appellant, the transport proof of evidence figures, the evidence of Anthony Jones. I'm just struggling to find it on the core documents at this moment. Don't know whether...
I don't have a copy of this either.
If it's the evidence, it won't be on the core documents. If you're electronic, you have to follow the link the council indicated.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, I have it open. I'm just, thought I was going to be helpful with core documents. Sorry about that. In this document by Anthony Jones, it sets out a number of alternatives that could be used in the appellant has highlighted 5 different alternatives, and I was just going to illustrate these and ask Miss Marwood to comment on them. Have you been given a copy? Sorry,
is it in the main proof, or is it in the appendices?
It's the main proof. It's entitled, I've got it as AHJ proof of evidence hyphen Wrington appeal hyphen figures.
Yeah, I've got that. Thank you. Do you have that?
We could probably lend you we'll lend you a set of...
I do have quite a good knowledge of all the roads around Wrington, if it helps.
Well,
yes,
I think it's if you're being asked to comment on a document, I think it's important. It's under your nose. Mr. Storer, for your witnesses to come, can I just ask you to ensure that if you're going to take them to something, make sure they've got the document. It'll
My-
hopefully
my-
save us a bit of time.
My
please.
apologies, sir.
That's all right.
I think it
I know
wasn't-
you're new to this, so I'm not criticising. I'm just hopefully helping.
Thank you. If Ms. Marwood, if I can ask you to turn to page 5 of these, and you should then see.
I've got a one-page map in front of me with the 5 different routes on them.
That's it, and it's in fact I can see in the bottom corner it's referenced in the absolute bottom right-hand corner AHJ/3.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Make sure we're looking at the same document.
Yes.
So the figure, I'll number them 1 to 5. The figure in the top, starting in the top left-hand corner, it has the outline of the proposed site, and then it has a black line that runs into the centre of the village from the site. I won't differentiate between the slightly two different routes they start with, but the point that we're concerned with is where the route meets Westwood Close and the Garstons. Sorry, the Glebe, my mistake, the Glebe, where it meets. That junction there is where we're mostly concerned. And that black route has just followed Station Road, and it curls round into Broad Street, which is what you've just described. Then the figure 2, which has a light blue line, and that shows that once you get to the junction with Westwood Close, you then cross over and you would go, and if I can then ask you to go back to your evidence with photograph 8.
Yep.
And it's headed, the alternative to this route is not viable, as the following photographs illustrate, and this is the footpath leading east of Station Road. So, and that is you pushing a double buggy down this this lane. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. And then photograph 9. That is, if I just refer back to this figure, as I'll call figure 2, this is where, on the corner of the Glebe, the blue line turns north, and what it does, it actually runs between the back gardens and the back gardens behind the houses in Station Road, and then turns left and re-emerges on halfway up Station Road. Is that what you're seeing? Is that what you understand by looking at that map?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. And so what does photograph 9 show us, please?
Well, photograph 9 shows us that footpath that you've just described behind the houses. It's specifically my daughter modelling, pushing a pushchair down there. We were going to take some photographs all the way down there, but she couldn't get any further, so we ditched the buggy at that point. It is a very, very narrow, bumpy, unmade-up track. It has overhanging branches. It is waterlogged in winter. You cannot go down there in winter. Yeah, unlit, unoverlooked, unattractive.
And this photograph shows it as being overgrown, but even if it were to be cut back, if this were to be maintained, what you've described there as being unmade and unlit and not wide enough to actually push buggies down, is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. My daughter often uses a scooter to go to, my other daughter uses a scooter to go to school, and she can't scoot down there. It has large rocks sticking out. It has tree roots. It's just a tiny, tiny little track.
And as I just alluded to, and if you just confirm, it then turns left just below where Wrington is written and re-emerges onto Station Road, and we've just heard your what you've said about there, so but it would just take you back into all those problems that you've just encountered. This suggests you can avoid.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you still have the problems where the traffic turns around, the coaches come around the corner, and traffic mounts the pavement.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to number 3, in the top right-hand corner. So this basically shows the same route, turning right, going north up the unsuitable back track there, and then turning left slightly further north and brings you out again, probably where those cars were parked, pulled onto the pavement to avoid the oncoming traffic. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. And therefore, although you might miss some of the narrow pavement, you've still got that narrow pavement, and you've got potential for cars to be pulling on there as so you then have potential for conflict between you and the cars trying to get past.
Yeah, and in addition, that section is covered by photographs 11 and 12, and the path there is uneven, unlit and overlooked and goes past a park. I don't know if any of you have walked down through a park in the dark before, but it's not a very safe feeling place. And we do have to walk our children to Brownies and various other clubs in the evenings in the dark, so we would never go that way.
And thank you. So even if we move on to the map number 5, where it's a purple line, what you've just described, this map shows the purple line going along the glebe, but still has to turn left past the old doctor's surgery, right along that bit of path that you were describing that's unlit and uneven, and then turning left and still coming out by the that bend where the cars were on the pavement. Yes, just to ask, is that any better than figure number 3?
No, it's not. It's longer and still has the same problems.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we come to map number 5, which is shown with the light green line, and this shows the footpath, and it goes up into Church Walk through the gated section. Is that correct? Is that footpath also gated?
Yes, it is also gated, yeah.
And then you turn right into Church Walk, and then if you're going to the centre of the shops, you turn left and back up into Broad Street. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you. And if we refer back to photograph 13, can you just describe what that is?
Yeah, so when you leave Church Walk, so Church Walk doesn't have any pavements, so you walk down the road to get to the junction of Silver Street, and that photograph 13 is where you reach the end of that junction. You've got a wall on your left-hand side, and then you've got this house here on your right. So you have to cross a corner there onto a well, it's not a footpath, it's a small white line to demarcate where pedestrians should walk. So you have to cross this busy junction where you can't see around the corner, and actually if you cross it from the other direction, I mean, you really can't see around the corner. It's a completely blind corner. And yeah, and I think on photo 14, so there we've crossed that road and we've turned to the left, going towards that junction at Broad Street and High Street. And as you can see, again, there's no footpath. There's a pharmacy there, so people using the pharmacy park outside there, and they park right up against a wall, so there's no way to avoid walking in the road, as you can see me doing there with a pushchair and my child on a scooter, to go further into the village. I know that this footpath also, I just want to make the point that that one's going left back into Broad Street, but when you're walking your children to school, you would take a right at the junction there between Broad Street and High Street, and then turn around into School Road. And that, again, doesn't have a pavement along it. There are cars parked perpendicular on the left-hand side, so it's a very narrow point, a very busy point, and it's very hazardous for pedestrians walking around there to get their children to school. I just simply wouldn't use any of that route. It's far too dangerous.
Thank you very much for pointing that out. I think that finished my questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you. Can we have cross-examination now, please?
Mrs. Marwood, good afternoon.
No, it's Miss.
Oh, so sorry, Miss Marwood, good afternoon. Can I have, please, your own proof in front of you? And if you wouldn't mind just opening it up at those photographs you've helpfully put in. I'm going to, well, I don't know, the last page is photo 15, which is the High Street.
Sorry, just switching my bulky folders.
Got it?
Ah, yes. Yep.
Well, that's brilliant. Just keep that photo in front of you, but we might also look at 13 and 14 too, which is Church Walk with Silver Street, and then 14 is Silver Street. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Yeah.
And I've also got the Transport Statement of Common Ground, that's between us and the Highways Authority, which has got some appendices. Have you seen that document?
No.
No. Can I have that handed up to you, and we'll just look at some of the images in the appendices. Now, as we're doing this, can I make it, Ms. Marwood, abundantly clear? I don't treat you as an expert technical witness, and so the tone of my questions will not be as I would put to a highways witness had you been such. And whatever I say to you by way of question, because I know how personal experience and emotions can run high, in no way seeks to undermine your own sense of the strength of your own feeling. But you appreciate that I've got to put matters in a context for the inspector in a broader sense. So I hope you accept the questions I put to you in that sense. In that spirit. So let's just go to the first pull-out sheet in the back of the Statement of Common Ground, the Highway Statement of Common Ground you've just been given. And that you should find is called the Local Highway Network, and it just gives us some names of where we're talking. Yeah? Yeah. And you, as I understand, live on King's Road, which, as we know, is the little cul-de-sac that comes off Butts Batch, yeah. And we can see that just above the word Batch, especially we're very familiar now where that is. And the education facility, which is the primary school, is off School Road, which indeed has got a big notation, School Road, and you can see, I hope, the rectangle, which is the education facility. Yeah. Yeah. And if you just turn the page, there's a rather more detailed map. King's Road we can identify again.
Yeah.
And the primary school is marked blue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the primary school you say your two children attend.
Yeah. So
your walking route is from King's Road, turn left on Butts Batch, yeah. Going north to where it says Old Bell Court, across past the post office, turn left up School Road, mm-hmm. and into the school that way, mm-hmm. and presumably and the reverse the other way as well. Do you go to the recreation ground, the playground tennis courts on the eastern side of the village too?
Sometimes, yeah.
The Wrington Sports and Social Club?
Yeah.
To get to that, and I appreciate obviously different routes might be taken depending on whether it's dark, whether it's raining, whether it's a nice day, etc. But how do you get to that from King's Road if you're taking your children to the sports club?
Yeah, so you, underneath, can you see where it says Old Station Close?
Yeah.
There's a footpath along there which meets up with Garston's Orchard. So you can walk along there and come out at the recreation ground.
Okay, that's helpful. And in fact, if just hold on to that page, that sheet, if you go a couple of pages on, you'll find, I hope, a map which is across the page with little purple dotted routes.
Is it the public rights of way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you see some purple pecked lines in my
Yeah.
version? And you can see, I hope, the recreation ground. You can see your King's Road. It's one of those east-west purple routes you take, is it, to get to the recreation ground?
I can't see it very well.
I know it's
I
very
don't think
small.
I need glasses, but it's very blurry.
You'd come out of your road, cross to Old Station Close, and then
It just
take a link.
I assume it is, but it just looks a bit further north than where I thought it was. But because what's that junction just below the purple line to the right? Is that the glebe?
I'd like to help you, but I'm not sure I can. Yes, it's in that vicinity, if nothing else.
Well, it is, but I couldn't say it's exactly that because I can't really see it very well. But I will say it's in that vicinity.
All right, that's helpful. Go back, if you wouldn't mind, to where we were before on the plan that shows local facilities and amenities. In addition, obviously, to the primary school that you go to from your home, you will have passed, won't you, the church on your left as you go up the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know for some that's an important facility. There are a couple of pubs, I think. I can see the Plough is marked in green. There's the Golden Lion pub, although I'm not quite sure its notation goes. The post office.
Just next to the post office.
Yeah, which is a little convenience store. And there are various others,
Yeah.
other facilities in that area marked as sort of a buffy colour, orangey buff colour. Yeah?
Yeah.
And then beyond that, the primary school that we can see.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you helpfully indicated that as far as you and your neighbours on King's Road are concerned, I think you said there were there 5 other families with children in that street?
Yeah, I did say that. Yeah.
Yeah. And on rainy days, you will tend to jump in your car to take the children to school.
I don't. I'm a stickler
You-
for looking
you
after
don't.
the environment, but others do.
Others do. All right. So they make that choice. When it's wet, they drive up.
Yeah.
All praise to you for not doing so, even when it's wet. So that's right. Now, you appreciate that the appeal scheme has got 2 links to it. There's what we call Appeal B, which is the northern link through, and Appeal A has its own access at the southern end, and which any particular resident takes might depend perhaps on where within the development their house happens to sit. But in terms of the northern access, that comes out at Westwood Close,
Yeah.
which is north of your house. And so somebody taking their child to the school or indeed themselves to either the church, the post office, the shops, etc., would follow the same route that you do up that road from King's Road,
Yeah.
indicated. Yeah. Those who come out of the southern end, you need to turn another map, and you should find on the next page, the appellants agreed with the Local Highways Authority to first of all introduce a new section of footway. Can you see that marked on the next map?
I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at here. Hold on.
The next page.
Yeah. I think I've got the piece of the page. It's
Yeah.
just quite a technical drawing.
So
Yeah.
you've got the bell mouth of the entrance, and then
Okay. Yeah.
and then where it says Butts Batch, can you see the dark black line, proposed footway, to tie into existing footway? And the inspector now is familiar with this. There's an existing footway thereafter, but there are works to be done to that. Can you see the orange notation, full
Yeah.
height curbs will be reinstated? Yeah? Okay. Now, you appreciate the Highways Authority, with those works in place, are content that the route, be it from the northern end or the southern end, is safe for pedestrians and cyclists up into the village and in particular up to the Wrington Primary School. You understand that's their position?
That's what I've been told.
And equally, you understand that the way in which the Highways Authority look at this matter is to do with, if I can put it this way, objective, testable data, and in particular, the accident record and personal injury record. That's the way they looked at it. And, of course, that differs from the personal perspective of a resident who knows what's called near misses. Yes?
Yep.
But in terms of the safety, the Highways Authority are content that that's a safe route. Now, tell me if this is going completely off your area of experience or understanding. Let me take you back to photograph 15, 13 and 14.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you just help me with where the 15 shot is? That's on the High Street.
That is from when you might have to refer back to your maps.
Yeah, I don't know, do, please. I meant you to. So go back to the local facilities and amenities map.
Oh, goodness me. Right, okay, so photo 15 is taken from where Broad Street meets High Street. It's from the south point of Broad Street,
Yep.
looking towards High Street. So it's the end of the pavement there. There's a small shop called So Beauty there.
Yeah. Broad Street and High Street. High Street we can see coming in from the north. Broad Street is where the post office is.
But it's taken from the south side, looking towards that. Yeah.
Understood. And we can see from this photograph where is that your partner there with the child?
Yes.
Where they're standing.
Yeah.
I think it looks like a yellow line, but there's no pavement as such there. There's a hatched
Yeah, that's right.
curb, essentially, yes. And they're in the carriageway.
Yes.
Yeah. And then if you turn the page to 14, that's Silver Street. And we know Silver Street snakes up from Cox's Green. And we have inspectors' comments about Silver Street and the use of that. But again, that's you, if you'll forgive me, a rear shot. You and your child, again, in the carriageway because there's no pavement at that point.
Yeah.
And then 13, that's the junction. Now, Church Walk I know, and that house I recognise is not very far from here, isn't it? No, I say here. Where we were yesterday.
It's a long way from
mad.
Weston.
Where we were getting mad. Not very far from where we were yesterday with the hall.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And there, because of the way the road curves, there is a sort of parking area, but it's not otherwise distinguished from the carriageway apart from those white dashed lines.
What do you mean? The ones that? Sorry, the ones that I'm standing in front
Yeah,
of.
where you're pausing there.
That's a junction to the road.
That's right.
Of Church Walk.
That's
yeah.
right. That's helpful. Now, tell me if this is completely outside your understanding and knowledge. But Wrington is an historic village. We know that, we recognise that, and we indeed endorse it and welcome it, celebrate it. One of the consequences of that is the highway network within it is not built to what one might describe as modern development, highway development standards. Yeah? Equally, you may or may not be aware that there's a significant move in urban development form to move away from what you would ordinarily have expected in terms of suburban development for curves and pavements and all the rest. And a great deal of design advice about bringing people and vehicles together, slowing speeds down, having shared surfaces, using the arrangement of buildings, arrangement of roads, to make sure that there is actually interaction. So rather than being car-dominated, it becomes something where everybody has a role within the highway network. Is that something that at all you're familiar with? Maybe your environmental hat on?
Yeah, I mean, that all sounds wonderful. Yeah.
Well, go to Poundbury. And I say that in some instances might be considered to be best practice in modern terms, rather than the dear old 1970s where everybody was segregated and had big wide pavements, etc. I hope this isn't an unfair characterization, you have described for the inspector your daily experience. And within that, you've described, if I could put it this way, instances of good and courteous behavior, and maybe some instances of less good and less courteous behavior. But it is an interaction between the pedestrian and the vehicle driver, user. Yeah. And indeed, as a vehicle driver, you may have also had similar experiences where sometimes people are polite and let you through. We've had the same driving around the little lanes around here, and sometimes they come straight at you, and you have to be the one who lets them through. Yeah? That is the nature of the use of this kind of historic highway network. Now, you appreciate that you're a resident, Kings Road, Butts Batch residents, the proposal residents, are coming from the same vicinity into the same network that you're experiencing, and which the Highways Authority consider is safe. At any given moment, if I can put it this way, at any given moment, you, Miss Marwood, you have a choice whether to go on your own walking up through this environment to get to what you're doing, whether with your children to do so, or to drive. That remains always a choice for you. You've indicated to us that for environmental reasons, you choose the former rather than to drive. And that's acknowledging...
And time reasons.
Well, that's the next one.
And parking.
Yeah, that's a very, very fair observation. I was going to do that, as it were, the loftier cause first. So for environmental reasons, you say, well, I prefer to experience the circumstances of the highway network, including the sense of risk and danger to me and to my children, than harm the wider environment by using carbon-polluting forms of transport. Very laudable, but it's your choice to do so.
I would disagree with that, on that specific point of the environment, in terms of my putting my children at risk.
But it is something that actually you do. You've told us that's what you do. And one of the reasons...
No, I know, but one of my reason for taking my children on that route will be for time and for parking.
Fair dues. Let's move I'm going to call this a slightly less lofty position. Okay. So for yourself, it's because you're willing to risk yourself to save the environment. Children, it's a time issue. You have a choice. You could take more time in a car, or you could take less time, but not in a car. And the choice you've made includes recognizing the risk, and risk is inevitable in all things, includes recognizing and weighing the risk to yourself and your children, rather than having the cost, inverted commas, of the time that it takes to go by car. Yeah? Now that mental calculation obviously is different for every single person, but that's what you've described to the inspector, that's what you do. And so you've weighed up, and obviously all children are precious to their parents, you've weighed up the sense of risk against the disadvantage of the time, and you say on a daily basis it's an exercise that you're content to do by walking rather than car for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similarly, and I don't now attribute it to you because you say it's your neighbours, not you, on another occasion someone says to themselves, well, actually it's raining, I'm not going to walk because I don't want to get wet. And so the inconvenience, the discomfort of rain on that occasion is greater than the time cost of going in the car. And indeed, the deciding factor between going by car or not by car for them, it appears, is not highway safety or the risk to their children. It's whether they're going to get wet or not. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And we can expect our residents to go through a similar calculation, instinctive calculation. I know people don't actually weigh it up in that sense. An instinctive calculation of preference. There's a preference to walk, there's a preference to go in the car, and there'll be a balance between safety aspects, the inconvenience aspects, and occasionally whether it's dark, whether it's wet, whether it's windy, whether they've got stuff to carry. These are all factors that go into that calculation. Yeah?
Yeah.
And so for our inspectors' purposes, we've got the Highways Authority consider the route to be safe. In terms of the propensity to walk as opposed to take a car, it's no different in theory, the propensity for the appeal scheme residents from you and your colleague, your fellow residents in Kings Road. You're doing exactly the same calculation, aren't you?
We do. There are, for example, the school does encourage us to walk to school as well. There's societal pressures, so there are additional things that encourage us to walk that aren't just in my evidence. We have a walking to school week, for example. And I think part of the point really of me, my objection to this whole scheme is the fact that over the last 10 years, I've lived here for 11 years, that journey has got progressively worse, and that risk feels higher, and every day it feels like there is more risk that an accident will happen, and then adding the extra cars and the extra people walking is going to increase that risk. So whilst I can only talk about the risk to date, there is a concern that should this go through, it will increase the risk.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got the highways figures. And
well, I'm just giving you my expertise from my experience of crossing it every single day. So, I mean, I'd love to see how these figures are arrived at, and when people give their reports on the safety, what time of day perhaps they cross it, how often they cross the road. And I know you've mentioned my feelings about it, but it is a fact that I walk it every day and it is dangerous. I can give you the figures of how often I walk to school.
No, I understand it, but the point I'm putting to you for the inspector's benefit is with that in your mind, you still do it. You still walk.
Because I have to.
Well, because it's preferable for you to walk than drive because of the time cost, you say, the driving incurs.
And that's the same for the people who will be moving into this development. So if that's how you're going to sell the houses, not you, obviously, how your client is going to sell their houses, that they're going to advise people to drive to school because it's safer, then that's really not how planning decisions should work.
Quite the reverse. What we'll suggest is that the people in the new dwellings will be just as likely to walk to the school as you are for the reasons that you give.
Well, the shared space idea, I mean, I used to live in Bristol, and I've seen some brilliant shared space schemes that have been put in, and I know you refer to planning. And those shared space schemes have things like tiled floor so that cars drive slower. I mean, we've recently had a 20-mile-an-hour limit put into the road. It does not make cars drive at 20 miles an hour. It is a fast road. Shared space only applies where the architecture has actually been set up to deal with shared space. I would say this is still a highway. It's, a carriage, maybe not the technical American definition of a highway. It is still a fast-moving road with fast traffic on it. It is not a shared space environment that you painted.
I was discussing concepts rather than the technicality. Thank you very much, Ms. Marwood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any questions for you. Are there any re-examination questions from you, Mr. Storer?
No, I think Ms. Marwood's very eloquently described the problems, and I appreciate her time today. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for coming in. That's slightly unexpected, so I appreciate you coming in, and you're also, I don't know, you might be up against it to get back for pick-up time, but excellent. Okay, well, thank you. Can we do a swap over of witnesses now? Is it now Ms. Abdul Wahab, Mr. Storer?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's Maria Wahab.
Okay. We'll give you a moment to swap over. Whenever you're both ready.
The mic, did you say this one? This one? Yeah, I'm not getting a ring back, so it should be okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And so could you, for the inspector benefit, just introduce yourself, please, and although your full name is Maria Abdul Wahab, you're quite happy for everyone to call you Miss Wahab, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm happy with Mrs. Wahab. Yeah, thanks.
And can you just set out your qualifications and background, just
Okay.
how long you've lived in Wrington, and just to let the inspectors benefit?
Okay, so I've lived in Wrington since 2009. I have no qualifications in planning or planning policy. And I just want to be clear on that those qualifications above are not in relation to planning policy. I do come from an agricultural background, and I have a very keen interest in agriculture and what happens in agriculture. It's an interest. I like to see rurality and agricultural affairs maintained, and I do have some up-to-date knowledge of what happens in farming. I became a member of Keep Wrington as Wrington for those reasons stated above. I think agricultural land is important, and as such, I would like to see agricultural land maintained where possible. So yeah, that's my introduction to myself.
And just to cover this, your statement presents data collected from the observations of the land agricultural usage during July 2020 to August 2021, and you're going seek to illustrate the how it's on currently productive land, and you also will give some evidence of the flooding that occurs in the lower fields, and on the sustainability of building on this site. If may just help if you run through the landscape setting just as you see it on regarding the agricultural land.
Okay, yeah, sure. So the proposed site is in Wrington Vale. It's in the rolling fields that form the natural floodplains for the River Yeo, and the water runs from the high ground north and from the Mendip Hills on the south. The amount of agricultural land lost, I think, would be fairly substantial to local farming, and making, eventually, if we continue to lose farming land, it would make local agriculture unsustainable. Contextually, the site sits atop the highest point of Wrington Vale, making it impossible to screen even with planting. The fields to the south of the proposed site of the development regularly flood, as does the lower northeast corner of the actual development site. Sometimes it's fenced off to stop the cattle churning up the ground. The corner site of the proposed hard-standing surface towards the footpath of the unmarked track can actually flood as well. There's a it raises the issue really of where the water will go and the runoff, because when you have the fields, it soaks in. Gaston's in Wrington village is just east of Butsbatch, and that suffered some unforeseen flooding after the development in Rickards. In 2018, it was finally managed with a very extensive management plan costing North Somerset Council 1.4 million, I believe. And it was a cost very much borne by the council. This causes a clause of, it actually caused a clause on my own personal planning for our drive at the time. They were so concerned about the risk of flooding that even one drive, a new driveway, was quite of a concern to the planning department. did you want me to continue reading the...
No, that's absolutely fine. So just going on there, as you say, you do see this land on a daily basis, and it's used for grazing. It's used for silage and silage harvest. If you just describe what you've seen and perhaps relate it to the photographs.
Sure. So the agricultural usage of the land, I do see it daily, yes, and I see it at varying times of the day and varying times of the night because of how I work. The land is currently quite productive, so it's never actually idle as a site. It is utilised for the production of both haylage, which formerly was silage, so that's why I've got haylage/silage. It's used for livestock grazing. From my observations, the proposed site yields a forage harvest of around 3 cuts a year, and that's every year. But I've only documented 1 year in this. Significantly, each cut produces a full complement of harvest. As a general rule in agricultural terms, the more mature the grass, the higher the productivity or the yield from that productivity will be. That's provided, of course, that you have decent sulfur and phosphates at their optimum level. I have noticed that each cut fills an equal number of trailers. This demonstrates a lack of forage thinning. So therefore the quantity of grass grown between each cut is equal or near to near to or equal in quantity. Obviously I can't comment on the nutritional quality and I can't comment on the significance of the productivity in relation to the quantity of grassland. To my knowledge, the field was reseeded in the last 10 to 15 years. And in explanation for a cut of haylage to have a good or adequate nutritional value, it needs to be cut in the harvest months between May through to sometimes September, generally August. So in order to gain those 3 cuts, there has to be adequate growth in that time. To have cuts worthwhile, you have to have adequate productivity or equal amount of growth. Poor value harvest land could not sustain this level of cutting and continue to have an equal to high productivity. The agricultural land classification didn't have a huge chemical analysis, and the report classified the land on sand, silt and clay and its water content. Poor quality forage harvest grass would have a more yellowish colour, and it's actually and repeated thinning. There isn't thinning because you couldn't get the 3 cuts. So it's not consistent is what I've observed. In non-harvest times, the land is grazed by livestock, so there is adequate grazing even following the cutting. The grassland is it's adequate without requirements for further grain, so there isn't any top-up feeding. If the land were of poor quality grassland, it would necessitate the cattle required extra feeding. I've said that twice. The grazing stock are generally cattle, or known as beef stock. The land is well maintained, and its productivity is demonstrated by its continuous maintenance being fertilized following the forage harvesting. In between grazing and harvesting, the land is maintained by rolling. Those who may not be familiar with farming, but if you are, I'm sorry to repeat myself on this one. So rolling is a system of levelling of the grazed furrows. So when the animals graze, they create a furrowing, which would make it difficult for harvesting. So the land is continuously rolled, and in itself, that's a significant thing to do. So the field, the maintaining this field has, as I said, been reseeded. Do you want me to continue?
Yes, if you wish to...
Okay, sure. Butsbat lands are grazing pasture, so any grazing area has its own unique biome. The natural occurrence, this is a natural occurrence of a community of flora and fauna, which will occupy the habitat. So, for example, the home is site to a family of deer. It's where Wrington residents take time to walk each day. The deer become very important, actually, in the sense that a lot of, it's really since lockdown, a lot of residents come just to see the deer for mental well-being. And the land is recognised forage area and flight route to the Greater and Lesser Horseshoe Bats. It's also a known flight corridor for the Greater and Lesser Horseshoe Bats. And on summer evenings, the bats can be seen foraging in the area, if you're quick, of course. And that's anyone that goes to look at bats will know that. The feeding area is preserved through grazing cattle, and the cattle are needed for what is known as the resilient dung beetle, and that's what the bats would feed on. The removal of the grazing cattle would remove the dung, and once you remove the dung, you obviously remove the food source for the bats. The village of Wrington, in conjunction with North Somerset and the parish council, supports ecological conservation of all species with a move towards rewilding in the area, which is about replanting so that we have a lot more bird and bee activity. The project has transformed some of the grassland verges into into wildflowers, which aim to attract the bees and butterflies and probably bring back some more of our native species. This does include 2 areas on the verge of Butsbat. I've provided a map of where they are. Okay, so that's that bit. And the proposed development site would require the rewilding areas to probably be tarmacked over for footpaths and verge entrance to Butsbat.
Thank you, and that does lead us into the figures. You did reference the planting, which I will come to, but to run through, the first one is the site, which we're now familiar with, but figure 2, just explain what that shows and what date that was taken, please.
So this particular photograph, I have to confess my photography isn't particularly good. This would have just been taken from my phone, where most of my photographs are taken from. It's quite a significant photograph, and of course, as I said, my photography skills probably don't do it justice. One of the reasons it's quite a significant photograph is you've got the animals grazing on the higher ground area. So the area floods, and it floods very quickly, and then that flooding recedes fairly quickly as well. And why I say it's fairly significant is, even though it floods, the animals can move to the higher ground and continue to feed, continue to graze. There's no extra feeding, so there's no topping up, so there's no added cost to the maintaining of the animals within that area. So that is why I see it as quite a significant photograph. I guess it's hard to explain. It's just a photograph. I'm not sure if I've made myself clear what I'm trying to say there, but it is quite significant in the sense that the animals have a space where they can move away from the flooding, and they don't sit, belly deep in water. And they do continue to graze, continue to feed. They actually are oblivious to the flooding. And the other thing, at the risk of repeating myself, is that there's no topping up of the feeding either. There's enough grazing to continue to graze.
Thank you. And the figure 3 is the same site, same date, but would it be correct to say that this the flooding, I think you've already alluded to, happens very quickly, but is it a frequent occurrence?
So the flooding occurs at varying different times of the day and the night. It can be there literally when you wake up in the morning, or it can, it will happen after heavy rain. It's not got to do with seasonal activity. So, in some areas where you have a river will burst its banks or something like that, it's more to do with the climate, the weather, what's happening at that point in time. And this, of course, is from my own observations. So if it's very, very heavy rain, you, several hours later, there are times when I'll say, look out, it's really, really heavy, it's really pelting it down. And that could be the middle of June, July, it could be the middle of summer. And I'll just go, watch it, the field will fill in the next 4 to 6 hours. It'll fill really, really quickly. It does recede reasonably quickly as well. And I haven't actually got a good enough photograph to show, but what you will then see is the flooding out onto Beam Bridge, which is caused by the River Yeo, where the water runoff fills up. So sometimes the road there, the Beam Bridge, will then flood on top of that. So it's two separate issues. One is from the river, the other is the way the water just collects in that area. Thank you. And figure 4, it's entitled Wrington Floods. Can you just give some context to that? Yes, that's so that's the bit that I explained earlier. This was it did actually take Wrington very much by surprise. The area does flood, and it is a known flood area, but these particular floods led into Garstons at that time. So the flood happened, and then the aftermath of it went on for a number of years. So the cause of the floods were that I'm not sure of the technical term, but they couldn't actually take the water runoff at the time. So people's homes were quite damaged by the amount of flooding that was caused there, but it was actually caused by new building. So the hard surfaces caused further flooding into the area. And that's the one that the council had to actually spend the money on to create better pipe drainage to address it. And I think the biggest thing was that, by then developers had gone. There was no recourse for action, and the area was left with flooding, and the council are the ones that had to sort it out. So it is a severe concern to those who live there. Thank you. And if I then move on to figure 5, just explain what that shows, just for the record. So this is what I was explaining about the forage harvest. So when you collect the haylage, I don't think anyone makes silage anymore. I think that's been stopped completely, to my knowledge. You need at least 24 hours of drying to get a decent harvest. If your grass is of poor quality, you would collect that much faster, and there would be certainly less of a quantity. It wouldn't be worth cutting. So that one demonstrates the cutting of the haylage and bringing it in within the 24-hour time period. It's quite a fast turnaround.
Thank you. And figure 6 is more just displaying the
So that's the drying overnight. Actually, they probably should have been the other way around if I was putting it in sequence, but yeah, that's where it was being dried. And then the other photograph is the collecting.
And yes, just I think figure 7 illustrates the cattle grazing following what would be the final cut of the year.
So that's by October. So the cutting, as you can see on the dates, was June. So June, July, August, sometimes September is forage harvest time. And then there is significant grass quantity to graze, so the cattle are grazed. I emphasize that it's cattle. There's no dairy facilities on that piece of land. So they would obviously be beef stock. And then they graze without any further feeding or topping up.
Thank you. And if I'll join these two, but figures for 8 and 9 just show the amount of work that's done to maintain these fields in good productive quality.
Yeah, they are still maintained. So figure 8 shows that there's enough care still put into the land to take the time to fertilize after the harvest. And the last one is after the cattle have been grazing to prevent furrows. There is rolling of the land. It takes quite a bit of time to do the rolling, actually. Sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a couple of days. So the rolling is really so that you make it, again, a decent forage harvest area for the following season. I mean, things in farming or agriculture, time is generally circular as opposed to linear, if that makes sense to people. So, you know, it's still utilised, and it's to show that it's a continuous circle of utilisation.
Thank you. And figure 10 is the image of a deer or a deer family.
So that's actually not one of my photos. That's one that was sent to me. I had quite a few of these sent to me by local residents. I didn't encourage anyone to take or send them. They just came to me. And the reason is what I put about lockdown and how people really, I mean, I don't know how many people, but certainly a lot of people come out to see the deer family, and it's become part of people's mental well-being, definitely throughout lockdown. That deer family, and it is a family of deer because we've watched them to see what happens. They roam just across that area, across that site. And I just put it in more because, I mean, I know deer are not a protected species and you know, they're not relevant to most things, but it is interesting how the local village community come to see that just because they see it as part of their daily walks or their mental well-being.
And by the daily walks, you're referring to the public rights of way and permitted paths around the site?
Not just the public paths. So that deer, that photograph was taken from, that particular photograph was taken from a resident in the Wiltons. So they had taken it from somewhere in that area. I just know that because I remember who gave it to me. Some people will walk along the Butts Batch area towards the allotments, and they have that regular circular route. I live right on what I call Wrington's dog walking route. It really is. You meet everyone coming along there. They will go along there, and then they will stop in the evening time in the hope they'll catch a view of the deer. Some people will use what is called the permissive path on the River Yeo. In certain times of the year, you'll find people just waiting on the bridge there as well, waiting to see the otter. I have never managed to catch a photograph of the otter. So the walk the walking route that people tend to follow is either the permissive path or the past my house, which is going down towards the allotments, down towards Bean Bridge. And, you know, people do wait there in the hope that they will catch sight of the deer. Usually early morning or late evening is when people generally use that route.
Thank you. And just finally, for the record, you were looking, I'm not sure, you said you may not have seen it, it's on the last page, figure 11 just shows the Wrington rewilding project.
So, yes, this is a local project. I haven't personally been a part of it. I've been aware of it, and I've certainly welcomed its setting up. That is being taken from the Wrington Village Journal, which is a bit like your local rag, I guess, where, you know, most information about what's happening in the village goes on. I just put it in because it highlights the Buttsbatch rewilding areas and the fact that people see it as worthwhile rewilding that area. The other areas I haven't made any significance to in this particular piece of work.
Thank you. And in fact, finally, there's figure 12, which is an extract from the Enlargement of Natural England agricultural land classification mapping, but it's
Yes.
We've already got the statement of common ground is not disputing that the appellant has carried out an assessment and has come to grade 4. Is there any other points you make about the land?
No, I'm not disputing the appellant's survey and the fact that that particular survey classifies it as grade 4. What I would say is that if I were selling that piece of land for agricultural uses, or I were buying that piece of land for agricultural uses and certainly not for development, I'd be looking at a different survey. And I think any person in agriculture or any farmer would probably do the same. The land usage isn't what you would describe as, and this isn't being rude, but it is a way of describing land. It isn't a stone picking of a land when it comes to agricultural land. It is actually quite productive and continually used agricultural land. It's not idle. And as I said, it certainly doesn't require stone picking. There is no stone picking takes place on that land. It's quite good agricultural land.
Thank you. And so this brings me to your section 6, page 10, where you talk about sustainability. If you'd just like to...
Could I just stop for a drink of water, if you don't mind? Okay, thank you, yeah. So paragraph 7 of the National Planning Policy Framework, footnote 4 states that the objective of sustainable development can be summarized as the need of the present of meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. As stated above, the proposed site is good quality productive agricultural land. So the rating of the class 4 isn't what was shown on the Natural England and DEFA. It is not a sustainable policy to continue to build on agricultural land, as previously stated, and to be in continual and productive, full productivity. This site has a worthwhile and meaningful input into food production. In the current global situation, whether it be climate change or less dependency on imported goods, so in other words, food miles, are a good indication of sustainability. We need to protect good quality land, and this proposed site productivity shows that it is good quality agricultural land. By removing this land, we compromise the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Paragraph 8 of the planning policy sets out 3 overarching objectives. This proposed development fails to deliver all 3, but in particularly the environmental object to protect and enhance our natural built and historic environment, including making effective use of land, improving biodiversity, and using natural resources prudently, minimizing waste and pollution, mitigating and adapting to climate change, including moving to low carbon emissions. This is not outweighed by a presumption to build, as there are many brownfield sites available for development, in addition to the dozens of sites that have permission but have not yet been built out, or would therefore fill the shortfall of housing numbers.
Thank you, sir. That concludes Ms. Waheed's evidence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. By way of cross-examination, what did you have in mind time-wise, Mr. Boyle?
I'll be able to answer that if I can ask one question. I can do it by way of clarification rather than formally cross-examination. If that.
Let's see how that goes.
I'm forgive me, Mrs. Wahab. I'm now confused because you didn't alter paragraph 63 of your proof. Do you, on behalf of Qua, dispute the fact that the field is correctly classified as class 4 in the best, most versatile category, the land classification category, or do you now accept that?
Well, I mean, I've read the statement of common ground, we've gone through it. Yeah. We can't afford in any shape or form to have a survey of our own carried out. So in that respect, the only existing survey that exists on it is that classification. What I'm saying is that the classification makes it look as if that land is not decent, productive agricultural land. And actually, you know, we know that it is from what happens on it.
Can I just continue for a second, so let's see if it goes anywhere. Understand the distinction between whether something is productive, and you've given us evidence about crop and numbers of crops and all the rest. You've also given us photographs of fertilizer being banged on there. But what I'm after is the land classification, which is a specific method which has been gone through in a report. Do you dispute that the correct classification under the land classification system, as shown by the report, is 4?
So in the land classification,
I think. Sorry to interrupt you. I think this is a yes or no answer. Do you or don't you dispute it? And then, by all means, explain whether you do or you don't, and why you did, and so on. But it would be helpful to me if you.
I feel I can't dispute something that's actually put out there in a report that has been compiled. What I am saying is that the classification on a national basis doesn't classify it as low as 4.
No, but you know, and you've again accepted in the Statement of Common Ground, that that's not suitable at a field level, which is why I keep on putting the point back to you. Given the report that Petter has,
yes,
do you formally dispute in front of him that he should put that to one side and say no, I think it's not 4, it's something better than 4. It's got to be 3A and above to be best, most versatile. Do you allege that?
I haven't got the expertise to say that.
Right.
What I'm saying is we see more than what is demonstrated in the report.
Well, no, the report doesn't tell us about production.
No, it doesn't.
It just tells us about land classification. And I'm, if you'll very kindly forgive me, I'm not interested in production, because that's to do with how the farmer manages the land. I'm interested in the land classification, because that has planning policy consequences, and that's what I'm about.
It does, and I understand that.
So can I just have it absolutely clear, and then you see we can draw stamps and all have a cup of tea. Do you suggest the inspector should not accept the classification he's been given at 4?
I think a classification of 4 says that it's not productive and it's not good agricultural land.
No, I'm not on that. It's really simple. Do you suggest it's a different class? Not it's good productive or bad productive or intermediate productive, but just simply there's a hierarchy of classification, 1 through to whatever it is. And the experts commissioned by the appellant say it's 4. Do you say the experts are wrong to have classified it as 4?
I can't say that they're wrong because we can't afford to conduct our own survey. I mean, obviously we are a group with limited resources, and I think that any survey that has been done for a particular purpose. If you were doing a survey for selling that land for agricultural land, a different survey may have been conducted with different results.
You're not suggesting that the survey results have been coloured by who commissioned it, or that they were in some way...
No, I'm not saying that.
No.
What I'm saying is that when you actually go about doing something, it can be done for a specific audience or a specific reason. Another survey may give a different classification.
Do you mind, say, if we pause at that point, perhaps for a cup of tea? I'll just reflect as to whether we need to pursue matters further in light of that.
That is fair. We'll adjourn there. It's what is it? It's well, it looks about 20 past on the clock over there to my left. We'll adjourn till 1:30. Just remind you, I'm afraid you're sort of left in a bubble as a witness. I mean, essentially, you can't talk to your team. You're consider yourself in a bubble. Okay, just sort of temporarily. I mean, if you need a comfort break, by all means go. But just respect the fact that you can't talk to people, please. Okay, we'll adjourn till 1:30. Thank you all. Okay, it's 1:30 by my clock. Is everybody here who needs to be here? Room seems to be emptying very gradually, but I think everybody is here who needs to be here. Okay, Mr. Boyle.
So thank you.
your thoughts?
I've reflected with my team, and I'm not going to trouble Mrs. Wahab any further. We're going to rest on the contents of the Statement of Common Ground between paragraphs 636 and 644 for your note, and the agricultural land report by Kernan, who are of course an independent in consultancy. That you'll find, sir, at CDC 4. Can't read the number now. 18. CD 4.18. Thank you.
Understood, thank you. Bearing in mind it was a short cross-examination, Mr. Storer, is there anything in re-examination?
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Okay, sorry to leave you dangling like that, but it is now all over. Thank you very much. Which just brings us to your last witness, Mr. Storer, please. Now we've got a name change, haven't we? It's no longer Miss Williams. It's now Miss Edgar. Is that right?
Mrs. Edgar, yes.
Okay.
I was just mindful of time. I did speak with Mr. Boyle earlier. I don't know if he's happy about this matter going ahead with the constraints of his last witness, but I'm happy to continue.
Well, yeah. What are your thoughts, Mr. Boyle?
What are we now? It's 3:30. I don't have long at all for Mr. Sudley. I mean, he's essentially here in case the third parties, or for that matter, so you, have questions to do with drainage matters,
Yeah.
because he's familiar with those details. So I'm literally proposing to have about 10 minutes with him just in the position, and then hand him over for questions either from you or Mr. Storer. So I think we're comfortable to get Mrs. Edgar, I'm going to cross out Miss Williams, Mrs. Edgar on now, and then the Qua case will be heard.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But I mean, we don't have an abundance of time, but I think we're probably okay. So let's hear from Mrs. Edgar. All week, for a fortnight since I heard about the name change, I've been drilling myself on getting your name right, Mrs. Edgar. So far so good. But apologies if I do call you Williams. I'm going to break with convention now and go straight in with a question for you, Mrs. Edgar. Is the name changed as a consequence of getting married?
It is,
Oh,
yes.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. So,
That's the last of my questions for the time being.
thank you. I'll get down now. Thank you very much. So just to introduce myself, I'm Lisa Edgar now, actually known as Lisa Williams Edgar. And I'm here just to talk about my own personal experience living at in Wrington and at 7 Westwood Close. That's been mentioned quite a lot during this inquiry. So I'll hand back over now to Mr. Storer.
Thank you, Mrs. Edgar. So it may just help, I think, and just to help you perhaps settle down, is to just read through the first 3 pages. I'll leave the conclusion till later, but if you wouldn't mind reading through to point 36, just to set the details of your evidence, please.
Yes, so just reading through now, if I start here. So I purchased with my husband 7 Westwood Close on 23rd of July 2012. And so we have lived there now for nearly 10 years. My property consists of a semi-detached 2-bedroom bungalow enclosed within a fully defined boundary as set out in the land registry documents. The relevant boundaries for Appeal B are the western and northern boundary. The western boundary is a planted hedgerow, while the northern boundary is a panelled fence. The fencing forms a right angle with the western hedging, and it runs for approximately 15 metres along the unmade track referenced in this appeal. In paragraph 2.4, the appellant acknowledges that the boundary with my property is a domestic evergreen hedgerow, but then omits any mention of the fencing along the northern limb formed by the unmade track. Despite acknowledging the hedge is domestic, they are still proposing that they have the right to reduce its height. The omission of any mention of the fencing would appear to be a major oversight in the preparation of this proposal. These two boundaries, that the very ones that fall within the sight line, are required for pedestrian safety, and the appellant is proposing that these are reduced from a current height of over 2 metres to just 0.6 metres in height. And I refer to paragraph 6.16 here, over a distance of 15 metres. Just to say that I have never been consulted on this matter by the appellant, and actually I wouldn't give my consent to a reduction in this height if I was asked. It would remove all privacy from my garden and make me vulnerable, make us vulnerable, having it so low. So such a proposal for me and my husband is not reasonable or realistic. Being unable to reduce these two boundary lines means that the appellant will be unable to provide, in my view, a safe access point onto the former Congsbury to Blagdon Railway route. The appellant would therefore be unable to comply with the North Somerset Highways requirement that this visibility splay is conditioned. The proposed access from the unmade track into Westward Close would be created through the hedge, which I think is a Contaniasta hedge along Westward Close. Whilst this may be non-native, it is decorative and has been tended to, as we heard yesterday, by the residents of Westward Close for nigh on 50 years. Since I have been resident, my husband has assisted Mr. Gallop, who lives in Westward Close, to trim the hedge. At no time has this been carried out by anyone else on that track, as far as we have ever noticed. It forms a functional and decorative screen that is enjoyed by a number of residents with habitat and shelter for birds and wildlife. Creating a 5-metre gap with another 4 metres removed for safety reasons, would remove this amenity enjoyed by these residents. It will open up the view of the houses in Brooklyn, reducing the privacy currently enjoyed by residents either side of this track. The hedge is functional as it reduces the noise, dust and pollution created by the heavy vehicles that use this unsealed track very regularly. The highways requirement that there is another staggered barrier at this location will be physically impossible to accommodate. The width of the track and Westward Close are too narrow to have this offset barrier. That has to be wide enough for children's buggies, disabled users, cyclists, etc., pushing bicycles along this stretch of footway. In reality, many of these vulnerable users will continue on the unsealed track and exit at the junction with Westward Close, which is unsafe due to the increased risk of the traffic. The units in Westward Close, including we have units, a dentist, which creates a lot of activity, and the large vehicles that use this track for access to the Wessex water sewerage works and what we call the piggery, a storage depot for industrial vehicles and machinery. Highways also stipulate that lighting is required to make this track attractive to pedestrians, presumably attractive and means safe. This is essential but cannot be achieved without compromising neighbouring properties, shining light into bedrooms that up until now have been dark. The unsealed track is not suitable for buggies or pedestrians, especially with anyone with a disability. If the surface is sealed, we wonder who will be funding and maintaining it anyway. This presumption of 24-hour access 7 days a week goes against the previous planning conditions that is explained further below here. The narrowness of the track will also physically preclude the fitting of a street light along the track, as demonstrated by the damage that often occurs to my fence panels. Any lighting column will be detrimental to local residents and the horseshoe bats that were mentioned earlier, relevant as within the North Somerset and Mendip horseshoe bats, SAC. So the appellant states that the unmade track has not been the subject of previous applications. However, this access track has been involved in 3 previous applications, 2 which were refused. 1 was granted, but the conditions limiting how and when access was permitted, and we have some supporting documents for that, hopefully. These were conditioned to minimize noise and nuisance to residents. The appellant has not addressed the issues of noise and loss of privacy to existing residents. Whilst the unmade track may one day in the distant future form part of the Strawberry Line cycleway, there is a difference between this type of use and that proposed by the appellant. The former usage would primarily be for leisure, with a low level of pedestrian and cycle traffic taking place during daylight hours. This is in contrast to the appellant's application for 24-hour access to a housing estate of 61 dwellings. As set out from what I've just said and above in this written report, this will necessitate a lighting column. Persons using an opened strawberry line cycleway would be approaching the section of unmade track with a good line of sight, able to easily observe any vehicle movements and clearly seen by these vehicles in plenty of time. The appellant's proposal will result in pedestrians and cyclists joining the unmade track at right angles, literally stepping out into the path of any vehicles accessing the treatment works or the piggery industrial storage units. Do you want me to stop there?
That's thank you, yes. And just to move on to the attachments, the photos further on. I appreciate, sir, that you've seen, I think you've visited the site or have at least some knowledge of it, I think you referenced, but just explain the photograph one, please.
Yep. Hang on, bear with me.
Just while you're right, I did walk up here and have a look at it from
So
this angle.
maybe I can summarise them, so it's probably easier. The first photo is the western and northern boundary of 7 Westwood Close, and illustrates the restricted view from the proposed new path onto the unmade track. And
yes, that's correct. And you'll see just to the right, that is our hedge and our fencing that starts there, that goes down along the track. If then perhaps we can move on to picture 2. This then is just a usual large HGV just exiting from the piggery. And where that huge HGV is coming would be where the access would be for pedestrians coming from the Buttsbatch development there. If we then look to picture 3, we're looking at it from the other way. This is the northern boundary, and the fence on the left is our fence to our garden, which has been repeatedly damaged over the last 10 years. Just demonstrating the lack of sightline really for pedestrians, for the proposed pedestrian access, especially at this fork here. They will be coming round the side of our fence that you can see on the left there. Photo 4 showing the curvature of unmade track and the unmade surfaces and the narrow width of Westward Close. And you'll see through the centre of the road is the hedgerow that was discussed yesterday by Mr. John Gallop, that I believe it has been discussed that would be removed. And then photo 5 is the proposed pedestrian access, if you can see on the left, with no sight line to oncoming traffic. And the piggery gate, you can see there, is often used by long and large vehicles. Also, just to mention that although we can see there's a 5 mile an hour limit there, that's only just really gone on up recently. And I imagine just from my own viewing that that's never adhered to. Well, hardly ever. They're usually, especially the farmer, comes down there at a great speed. Mr. Storr, do you want to come in at any point?
I was, you were going so well. But photo 6 shows more damage to the to your fence.
Yeah.
Photo 7 shows vehicles exiting the piggery, and again photo 8 just showing the size of some of the vehicles using it.
Indeed.
And photo 9 is a large tanker entering from Westwood Close, and gives an indication of some of the parked cars and other vehicles in the close. Just going back, if I may, to photo 5. Well, in fact, we'll go with photo 2. Just to, I think this photo was used to illustrate the angle of the track as it joins, from the piggery onto the onto the unmade track.
Yes. Yes,
That's correct.
that's taken just looking down to where you can see my hedge just going past on the right there. And these vehicles sometimes find it incredibly hard to do that turn. And also, just going back to photo 3, the constant damage we have to our hedge, our fence, excuse me, we've had to have our fence replaced many times, or just botched up, because now we've almost given up repairing it because of the constant damage. I expect that the inspector has himself seen that the latest damage we have left. And this is because the vehicles going up through there are so wide, there's hardly a gap either side, especially no gap for a pedestrian.
Thank you. And just looking at photo 3, and just beyond your fence line, can you just describe the view on the left-hand side, just beyond the fence? If you can, just describe how one track joins the other.
Going up this lane. So when we get to the fork, is that what you meant?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you get to the fork, just at the end, we have huge tankers going off to the waterworks, if you can see just going up to the right there. And to the left, through the gates there, we have tractors, we have large vehicles as well, going up to the piggery and the units. And then if you can imagine turning to the left there, there is then our hedge, our boundary line that goes along our garden. And then we have the proposed entrance then for the public access.
Thank you. And if you move on to photo 5, which is effectively just closer to that fork, taken from the right-hand side of the track, so not hard up against the hedge it is, but you are sort of in the middle of that track and not and fairly close to the northern boundary, the right-hand side. I think just if you could just describe, and just I'm trying to make my point really and enable you to make your point, but the what can you see of the gate, gated access, just to give some idea of the view to the left-hand side?
The view on the left-hand side, sorry?
The view on the left-hand side.
Yeah. The view on the left-hand side, there we see the gate that the farmer has put up there. And then past that is a huge mound of earth. The corner of the fence here, my fence now, has been smashed out. So that was taken before my fence was smashed out again by a tanker. So Richard, Mr. Storer, what point am I making
Sorry,
here?
no, I'm not trying to ask you. I'm just asking you to describe, and perhaps I can make it slightly simpler. Question: Can you see all of the gate that accesses the piggery from this particular angle?
No, I can't see all of the gate at all.
I think it's my lack of questioning skills,
view,
so I'm not sure I was making that very clear.
The view. I mean, I must say, it's quite rare that I would walk up there myself, and the farmer actually makes it quite clear that he doesn't want us going through the gate anyway, because of safety.
Thank you. And I think you've been handed some documents from the appellant, the ecology document. I'm going to try and find it myself, I think, at this moment.
Yes, is this? No? Have I been handed something?
The ecology for Appeal B, ecology note, I think it's called.
Come, pincer. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay.
Right,
Thank
you'll
you.
have to bear with me because I haven't got a copy up. I'm just trying to find it. I do apologise. It's got lost in the other documents.
Am I waiting for you? Mr. Storer, am I waiting for you?
Yes, I do apologise. I'm afraid everyone's
No, that's
waiting for
fine.
me while I try and find this document.
That's fine.
Apologies, sir. It got lost in the many many files. Just, Mrs. Edgar, if you can just look, I think, possibly at the photos, which is really the point. On the copy I have, so it's page 3, there's photo 1, photo 2, photo 3, photo 4, 5 and 6. There's
Yes.
one page, literally, the first page is the
Yes, I
starts
have
about
it.
the proposed works, methodology. Yes, if you're okay, if you found the photos, can you just describe what those photos show, please?
Okay, so just to make sure I'm on the correct page, this is where I have 6 photos here. The first photo 1, Westward Close, is this correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. So the first photo, Westward Close, yes, that's looking up. Westward Close, you can see the hedgerow along the middle, and just to the right would be the track so the hedgerow separates Westward Close to the track. Then the second photo is the track, so the other side of the hedgerow, and that's the start of the track up through to the entrance of the waterworks and the units. Again, photo 3 is the non-native hedgerow between Westward Close and the existing lane we have here. Photo 4, again, the 4.5 metre section of the non-native hedgerow to be removed for the cycleway link. And that's the view from Westward Close through. And photo 5 is 5.5 metre section of non-native hedgerow to be removed again. And that's the view from the existing lane. And photo 6 is I think what I described as the big hump or hill, which is the bramble scrub, and that is by the Farmer's Gate.
Thank you for that. Bearing in mind that we've just seen your photos, what is different between these photos and the boundary line shown and your photos of the boundary line shown, please?
Just looking at these, the difference, well, the big difference to me is there's no vehicles, no tankers, which is quite rare to be able to get those pictures without them. I can't actually see my fence at all. Our fence isn't there, and they look quite cut down here.
Thank you. I think you've answered my question that there is no fencing shown along this boundary line, is there?
No, my fencing isn't there. Well, it's taken without our fence there, yeah.
So to describe this boundary track as bordered by hedgerow would be incorrect, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
And given that position, that as we've seen from your photographs, that the southwest corner, so where your fencing joins your rear hedge, it wouldn't be possible, as we've described, to make a sight line from the across from, to enable people who, as they reach the edge of the existing track to the piggery and stepped off, they wouldn't actually be able to see very much of the track to their right.
No, they wouldn't.
And as you said, you certainly haven't been asked to take down your fence from from 2 metres, 6 feet, to about 2 feet tall, have you?
When, I wouldn't want that at all. I have small grandchildren. I wouldn't want a lower fence. And we've been used to that boundary and that seclusion. Also, the track makes an enormous amount of dust, and so the hedgerow and my fence actually just helps that as well. The amount of dust that, from a personal point of view, I can't even hang my washing out there, so it gets covered in dust.
And that would only be worse if the bits of hedge line were to be removed to facilitate this pathway.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, this would be be made worse if sections of any hedging were to be removed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we've heard, as you say, that the hedge has been maintained by your husband over a number of years, as well as the local residents. Have you ever seen anybody else cutting that hedge?
No, I haven't.
No, that's okay. So no one has would think that they have any ownership if they haven't actually maintained it themselves.
No.
And the I think we're just going to, I didn't ask you to read the conclusions, but I will actually just, you did allude to it, and I will just come back to it briefly. Your, the narrowness of the unmade track and the fact that your fence keeps getting knocked down, I think you've already said about the opportunities for putting up lighting standards as highways might have suggested.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry,
but
sorry, I will speak.
I'm partially deaf, so
Yeah.
I'm
Sorry, I should speak more into the microphone, sorry. No, my point was that you've already shown how much or how narrow the track is,
yes,
because the vehicles use them. And I think you already alluded to it, but I just want to make sure that because the vehicles take the full width and take sections of your fence away fairly regularly,
yes,
there's not a lot of space for any light standards, any light lamp posts, to put it.
yeah, correct. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So. And I was just going to come back to your the last part of your statement, actually, on where you, because I asked you to cut away from that. The conclusion that you had at the end. So once you finish at page on number 36, the following page is entitled Conclusion. If you could just read those out to explain why I think it sums up the problems with this track.
Bear with me. Okay, here we go. So conclusion. The proposed pedestrian access is unsafe due to the lack of vision available at the point of egress from the proposed site. The positioning of the outlined pathway is limited due to the access required for the piggery, sited too far west of the boundary line, will conflict with this access and the vehicles entering the piggery. Therefore, the proposed sight lines require the lowering of my hedge and fencing, and this is not acceptable. The requirement for additional lighting would be necessary to make this footway safe, but it is not reasonable given that it will have an adverse impact on the quality of life and privacy currently enjoyed by the adjacent residents. The issue of noise has not been considered. The physical sighting of this lighting is not possible due to the narrowness of the track and how the wide vehicles already damage my fencing. To make it suitable for the volume and type of user proposed by the appellant, the surface needs to be sealed. The access onto Westward Close with a staggered barrier is not feasible due to the narrow width of the roadway, nor is it reasonable to do so as it will further restrict parking opportunities for local residents along the southerly curb. So down where I am, at the bottom of the cul-de-sac, we have a turning point there. We can regularly move our cars if anything large needs to turn there. However, when we have dustbin day, lorries, delivery vehicles, if that hedgerow was taken down and the public access came out into what we call the turning point, I would imagine that would be really dangerous for pedestrians.
And I think that on that final point, you're saying that if pedestrians and cyclists pushing through this barrier would be in the path of potentially turning vehicles, reversing back into that space, if they could, given the fact that it would be mostly removed by the staggered barriers.
Yeah. I think you can see in one of the pictures that there, at the bottom of the turning point, there are two cars parked there. I think one of the photos, but those cars can be moved if needed. And also, as you said, it provides extra parking for people, and that would be taken away.
Thank you, sir. I think I've finally got there. I do apologise for that delay.
That's okay. We'll move on to cross-examination, please, Mr. Boyle.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Hedker, good afternoon. I'm going to add my congratulations to the inspectors.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hedker,
Thank you.
I'm going to concentrate, if I may, on point 3 of your conclusion,
Right.
which is the proposed sight lines require the lowering of my hedge and fencing. This is not acceptable.
Yes.
Okay? Because what I'm hoping to demonstrate, and I'm afraid ultimately I'm not seeking to persuade you, I'm seeking to inform the inspector.
Yes.
What I'm hoping to demonstrate in the next few questions is they're simply not going to arise. We're not proposing it. We're not going to do it. We don't ask the inspector for permission to do it. And of course, we don't ask your permission to do it because it's not actually part of the scheme. Let me see if I can make that good by some documents.
Yes.
You appreciate that Appeal B, as we know it, is in respect of a full, that is a detailed application. It's not like the housing scheme, which is reserved matters, outlining the reserved matters. The inspector gets to approve specific plans showing the proposals.
Yes.
And the drawing number that he's been given is, and so you'll have this, of course, is P19-2039-001. That's the drawing of the proposals. And it's document E3, E3? Yes, document E3 is that plan within the core documents.
document E3. Bear with me, please. Yes, E3.
Great, lovely. Now, can I ask you to go to your, with that open in front of you, ask you to go to your photos. And photo 3 shows what you say is the northern boundary, your fence.
Please.
And if you go back
Yeah.
a page, photo 1 is looking the other way, as I understand it, and it's showing the corner of your fence where the northern boundary then turns to be the western boundary, which is a hedge.
Yes.
Yeah, grateful. So we just keep those two photos readily to hand.
I have.
Now, do you have the statement of common ground between the appellant and Qua? If not, it's coming to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
You got that? Now, what I'd like you to do with me is, first of all, if we go to Appendix 3 of that document, the Qua Statement of Common Ground.
Sorry, where is this on the...
Appendix 3, just hunt your way towards the back of the document, and you should find a sheet saying Appendix 3, and it says Current HM Land Registry Title Plan.
Hang on. Is this the file that I've just been given? Yeah, Appendix 1. Yeah, hang on. Yes,
Got
thank
it?
you.
Brilliant. Right. Now, what you've got there is, as it says, the current HM Register Title Plan 4, and as I understand it, that's your property number 7.
It is.
Yeah, and there's a red line. Now, don't respond just yet, because I need to go through the process with you first.
Okay.
It's on an OS base. Yeah?
Sorry?
It's on an OS base, Ordnance Survey base.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can see the red line, which the Land Registry has recorded as being the boundary of your title. And just immediately north of that is a solid black line, which continues over the words Westward Close, above the words Westward Close. You see the solid black line?
Right. Have I got the right page here? Can I make sure I have the right?
Yes,
Can
of
you
course.
repeat the...
So Appendix 3, Current HM Land Registry Title Plan for Title ST 300623. There's a
Yep.
map attached to that.
Yes.
The map has got an area outlined in red.
Yep.
Number 7 is your house.
Yes.
And do you see where the words Westward Close are?
Yes.
Immediately above that is a dotted line.
Yes, I do.
And immediately above that is a solid line.
Yeah.
Then there's
Yes.
a gap. And
Yes.
then there's another solid line, which is the back of the gardens of Brooklyn.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, just pausing there, okay, that's what the registry shows, that the red line of your boundary is south of the solid line and in alignment with the dotted line.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you can also see the track coming in from the sewage works
Yeah.
on the left-hand side there, right. Just pausing there. There's a blown-up version. I'm afraid pixelation wrecks things, but there's a blown-up version on the next page, which we hope makes that all easier to see. Okay? Now,
Yes.
Appendix 4
Yes.
is information that you have provided, as I understand it,
Yeah.
from your, as it were, hard copy deeds. In other words, the stuff you got presumably from your vendor when you purchased it.
Yes,
Not the land registry extract, but the thing you physically
from
bought.
a solicitor,
Yep.
yes.
And can I just look at the turn over the page?
Yeah,
What we've got is, and I'm working from the blown up version for ease.
yes,
Working from the top, there's the solid line, which is the back gardens of Brooklyn.
yes,
In this version, there's then a pecked line,
yeah,
and then there's another pecked line parallel to it,
yes,
and then westward close.
yeah,
Yeah. And in this version, the red line of your boundary is on the, as it were, the northern pecked line rather than in alignment with the southern pecked line. Yeah?
yeah,
So, and as I understand it, from that, there has been a discussion, I'm not even going to say this is a dispute, there's been discussion as to whether or not your title, your legal title, extends to the solid line in the first plan we looked at,
yeah,
or is restricted back to an alignment with the pecked line in
Yes.
the first one we looked at. Now, for my purposes, I am not going to enter into that debate. The inspector is, I'm going to say principally, not always, but principally unconcerned with private law ownership matters.
yeah,
I'm on a slightly different point, which is whether any of this is relevant, okay? Because let me, for the sake of argument, assume that the boundary of your property is the northern of those two lines,
yeah,
yeah? Because that, as I understand it, is what you would say photo 3 shows.
Yeah.
That fence is the solid line, the northern of those two
Yes.
parallel lines, bounding the unmade track.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let me assume, for the sake of argument, that's absolutely right, and that's
Yeah.
your title, and it's the land registry when transferring details across, as sometimes happens, the alignment has not been quite right compared with the correct position. So, let's go then, please, to the drawing in front of the inspector, because this is what he's going to be asked to approve.
This one, that's it?
Yeah, that's it. And I'm going to also, forgive me, ask you to have to hand, will be provided, with the transport statement of common ground between the Highways Authority and the appellant, because there's another plan you need to look at. So starting... Okay, whoever gets there first, that's great. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, starting with the drawing at E3, so P19 ... 001. Yeah.
Are we talking this one? Sorry,
Yeah,
this?
the
Yes,
one you
thank
had
you.
over. Got that? Okay. Now, do you see the notation proposed 2 metre footpath with 0.5 metre verge either side?
Beg your pardon?
Do you see the notation proposed 2 metre footpath? There's an arrow to where it's shown on the plan.
Yes,
Got it?
thank
Brilliant.
you.
Now, do you see where there are then a pair of splayed dark black pecked lines?
Yeah,
Yeah?
yes,
And
thank
do
you.
you see the notation for that is 1.5 metre times 15 metre pedestrian visibility splays?
Yes, I do.
You got that? Now, do you see where the right-hand side, if I can put it that way, the right-hand side splayed line meets the existing track?
Yes,
And the existing track is shown in yellow. The land to the south of it is shown in blue.
yeah,
And the north-south blue line is your boundary, isn't it? It's your western boundary.
yes,
Yeah?
yes,
Got that?
I have.
Okay. Now, this is the drawing which the inspector is going to be asked to approve, and it's a drawing agreed with the Highways Authority as providing the visibility displays for those coming out of the site onto the access track. And we can see, can't we, that where that PEC line meets the corner of the orange and blue lines,
Yes.
yeah, that doesn't cut across even your purported northern boundary. It's at the point that we saw in your photograph 1.
Yeah. Under here somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah? So if we look at drawing 001, you see two parallel yellow lines bounding the access track. Yes?
Yeah.
And the southern one of those runs along the alignment of your fence, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Because inside that you'll see another parallel pale line, which is, on other pictures, in alignment with a dotted line, other maps, which is the inside of the hedge. So the southern orange line, or yellow line, is the alignment of your fence, which you say is your northern boundary, which you say your deeds show to be the case. Yeah? And the proposal of the appellants approved by the local highways authority and placed before the inspector is not to impinge on that northern boundary as per the fence. Do you see that?
Yeah.
I'm grateful. Now, that's one set of sight lines. And those are the agreed sight lines with the Highways Authority. There is a set of conditions. They're in another document. I can take you to them if you need to. We're going to have a condition session in due course anyway, but there's a condition to require the sight lines to be achieved,
Yeah.
and these are the agreed sight lines. Now, if you're in the statement of, can you now go to the statement of common ground with the Highways Authority?
Right. Yes.
The plan we've been looking at, you will find again at Appendix J, I think it is. But in any event, it's a pull-out sheet. I think it's Appendix J.
Have to have help finding this.
It comes after the safety audit, which is Appendix I. I can't be much more helpful than that, really, I'm afraid. Mr. Coombs is coming to help you with it.
Thank you. This. Thank you. Thank you.
There we go.
Yes.
Got
Thank
it?
you.
So if you find Appendix J, just satisfy yourself, it's the same drawing that we were looking at.
Yeah.
I know I sound like a conjurer now. It's the same drawing that we were looking at E3. So there's the dotted line. That's the proposed sight lines as per the drawing before the inspector. And that doesn't impinge upon any part of your property, doesn't require any part of your hedge or fence to be reduced, and we're not asking the inspector to give us that authority, and we're not asking for you to give us that authority because we're not proposing to do it. Okay?
Nice.
Now,
Yeah.
just as it happens, you mentioned the dust issue
Yes.
of the track. The section of track which is to be used as the footpath is itself subject to a condition in terms of its surface treatment. And that is the section, as we can see from this drawing, which would run past your property. So you may be happy to accept that, in fact, there's going to be an improvement in your living conditions, subject, of course, to the discharge of those conditions, if that surface is then sealed along that section. So you won't have lorries going past, but creating dust at that stage. Now, you need to turn on to the next page within the same Appendix J to 19203901 revision D.
Yeah.
You see that?
I have that.
And this shows in a sort of purpley colour, you see the notation, land owned by number 7 Westwood Close. So that's you, Miss Edgar. Do you have it?
No, sorry. I am on the right document.
Revision D. You should see your house recognised at number 7, and it's
Yes,
bounded
I
by
have.
a sort of purpley colour.
Yes, I have it.
And
yes.
if you look to the key, the purpley colour is entitled Land Owned by number 7 Westwood Close.
Yeah.
And again, the draftsman of this drawing has shown your boundary as running along the northernmost of the parallel lines. In other words, the alignment of your fence, hasn't he? Yes?
Yes.
So again, he's not entered into the debate as to whether or not your land registry or your title is the more accurate. He's assumed that the fence is yours and that's your boundary.
Yeah.
And we can see, this time I think it's in blue rather
Yeah.
bizarrely, you can see that the peck lines we've just been looking at,
Yes.
that doesn't impinge upon your fence from the western side. And then what's been newly introduced is, and this I'm instructed as a result of discussions with the Highways Authority, is an equivalent set of visibility displays on the eastern side, the Westwood Close side. You see that splay of
Yeah.
peck lines, which again has been drawn so as to avoid impinging on your property in that corner.
Yes.
Do you see that?
I can
And
see
again,
that.
you've got the notation 1.5 times 15 metre pedestrian visibility displays.
Yeah.
And again, there's a condition to require that that is undertaken. Yeah. And so again, we can agree, I hope, that neither on the west nor on the east would the works involve impinging on your property or require the reduction of your fence or the reduction of your hedge.
I can see that in these plans.
I'm grateful. Just one point, and it's not really so much for you as for others. Do you see the grey notation?
Yeah.
If you keep that open, if you go back to Appendix G in this document, Appendix G.
In here?
Yeah. Same document. It shouldn't be very far away, just a few pages back. You'll find Appendix
Okay.
G.
Hang on. Is this Appendix SOC GH?
H&T stroke G, and it's
Ah,
entitled Adopted Highway Record.
Hang on. No, we're on H.
That looks, you're nearly there, I think. Because I recognise the colours.
Hang on. Is this for the lighting? No.
No, it's called Adopted Highway Record.
There we go.
Do you have a pull-out page?
This,
It should have green, yellow and pink roads marked on it.
bear with me.
Do you want my beautiful assistant to come and help you again?
You might have to help me. Looks like that.
Mr. Coombs is coming over. Here we are.
Mr. Coombs. I'm keeping you fit today.
This document.
Oh, look, thank you. Thank you, I have it. Thank
Got
you.
it? Brilliant. Adopted Highway Record. Now, this isn't a plan produced by the appellants. It's produced by North Somerset as Highways Authority.
Yeah.
And you see the legend, it shows different categories of highway with different colours.
Yes.
And the green is called Class 4 Unclassified Road.
Yep.
Yeah. And if
Yes.
you look to the plan, you can see Butts Batch, I hope, and then you can see Westward Close,
Yeah.
and there's the green extent of Westward Close.
Yes.
And you see it embraces the solid line as well as the pecked line on its northern side. In other words, it embraces the whole of the hedge as well as the metal carriageway.
Yes.
Now, forgive me if this is all outside your knowledge and understanding, but you may appreciate that where there are highway rights, the Highways Authority can do works or authorise works within the highway, subject to the Highways Act, regardless of private ownership.
Yeah.
So
a shame.
even were, and again I don't enter into the debate, even were the gentleman we heard from yesterday to claim adverse possession of the hedge,
Yeah.
as it's in the highways works can be authorised by the Highways Authority through the process of the 278 agreement. You don't need to know the details. Such that, again, the provision of the visibility displays, which is to do with cutting the hedge to a certain height and also punching the hole through the hedge to gain access from the private road to Westward Close, is achievable by the Highways Authority regardless of any private law issue that might or might not arise.
Okay.
Yeah. But I say that because others are listening. For your purposes, none of those works we can see from this plan, either within the land controlled now by the appellant or within the highway, impinge on land that is owned and occupied by you. Can we agree that?
Okay. I thank you for clarifying that.
I'm grateful. I think on that basis, so I don't need to ask the witness any further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No, I don't have any questions for you. Anything by way of re-examination?
Sir, I wasn't going to ask Mrs. Edgar to comment on these plans. So I'm, yeah, I mean, I was going to bring it up with the appellant's witness. So I think I will do. I don't think it's reasonable to ask Mrs. Edgar further technical questions on sight lines. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Edgar.
Thank you.
Thank you. That just leaves Mr. Stoodley. Whilst you set up, should we, not? I mean, I'm happy to sit after 5 just to mop things up. It's
Have 5 minutes, but
Yeah.
not necessarily a formal adjournment. Get Mr. Studley to come
yeah,
and sit up
absolutely
here.
what I was anticipating.
You have his proof.
I do.
Goodness
Yeah.
knows what I've
So we'll
never
adjourn now
heard of.
until 22. Thank you. We're adjourned. from Mr. Stoodley, please. I think it's worthwhile, as you say, Mr. Boyle, in terms of mindful that people will be watching on the internet, and concerns have been expressed locally regarding flooding. So I think it'd be helpful from that point of view. I don't come into your evidence with any questions for you, but who knows? You might say something that might well, I might struggle with. So I might have a question for you off the back of that. But I haven't got any questions for you at this stage.
Thank you very much. So I'll tend to him in case Mr. Storer has any. But I'll first of all introduce him to the inquiry. If I take up your proof, it's very short proof on drainage and flooding. I discover you're Ben Stoodley, is that correct?
That's correct.
You tell us you have a BSc Honours degree in Civil Engineering. You're an Associate Director of Focus on Design, Multidisciplinary Consultancy, specialising in Civil Engineering, Planning, Urban Design, Master Planning. Focus, you tell us, employs 16 full-time civil engineering and architectural professionals. A little bit of your background: you're a technical manager at Keepmoat Homes, infrastructure manager at YTL Developments, and then principal infrastructure engineer at Hydrock. You have over 20 years' experience in civil engineering design schemes ranging from 15 to 2,500 units across the country, and we see the rest of the text there. You've been appointed by Strongvox as an expert witness on matters relating to drainage and flooding in relation to the appeal that we know as Appeal A before the inspector. Focus on design prepared the drainage strategy, which the inspector has as part of his core documents, and the accompanying calculations for the site in support of the planning application. Is that all correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you just to read not all of this text, even though it's quite short, but just three discrete passages, starting, please, with the existing site summary at 2. You have that?
Sure.
And just read, please, for me, paragraphs 2.4 to 2.7.
Access to the site is currently via half yard to the southeast of the site. There are no existing sewers or ditches, watercourses located within the boundary of the site. Due to the existing topography, surface water runoff from the existing site currently drains in 2 directions. The southern half drains to the Kongsbury Yeo, beyond the southern boundary, and the northern half drains towards the northern boundary and the track beyond. The proposed development comprises of construction of up to 61 dwellings, including vehicular access, roads, car parking, public open space, drainage, and associated infrastructure works.
Thank you very much. And then the next section is entitled Proposed Outline Drainage Strategy. And of course, this is an outline scheme. You divided it into surface water drainage at 3.1 and foul water drainage at 3.2. Can I ask you first of all to read, in terms of the surface water drainage, I think we can probably pick it up at 3.14.
Sure.
If you read from 3.14 to 3.16. Sure.
Therefore, an attenuation-based drainage strategy is proposed to provide storage for all events up to and including the 100-year event, including 40% climate change. It is proposed to discharge runoff for the majority of the site via gravity to the Kongsbury Yeo along the southern boundary of the site. Discharge into the watercourse will be restricted to 4.7 litres per second, which is the equivalent Q-bar Greenfield rate, via a hydrobrake control device for all events up to and including the 100-year plus 40% climate change event. Attenuation will be provided within an online attenuation basin and additional offline underground cellular storage tanks. The runoff from the northern part of the site is proposed to discharge into the existing 375 diameter public surface water sewer to the north of the site. Wessex Water revised that a connection to the existing surface water sewer can be considered when all other methods in the SUDS hierarchy are proven not viable. Discharge will be restricted to 1.4 litres per second, the Greenfield Q-bar rate, via a hydrobrake flow control for all events up to and including the 1 in 100-year plus 40% climate change event. Attenuation will be provided within an online attenuation basin.
Thank you very much. Just going to pause there. Help us, first of all, the inspector has to be familiar with this, but what is the importance of a Greenfield Q-bar rate? What is that about?
So the Greenfield Q-bar rate is the mean annual flood flow rate for a Greenfield site. When assessing developments such as this, and certainly Greenfields, we have to consider the discharge rates for a varying number of return periods, the 1 year, the 2 year, the 30 year, and the 100 year. So that will give us a value of ranges that increase the discharge rates as the year periods increase. The Q-bar rate currently sits at roughly the 2.3-year rate. So in theory, the Q-bar rate is a significant improvement on the 1 in 100-year rate, which the site needs to be assessed against.
Thank you very much. And so by restricting it to that Q-bar rate, what does that mean for prospective flooding circumstances as a result of surface water runoff?
So in the undeveloped site, in the 1 in 100-year event, the discharge from the site will be significantly more than the Q-bar rate. The figures are in the report, but the 100-year rate is roughly 11.3 litres a second. By restricting to the Q-bar rate, which is a much lower rate of 4.7 litres a second, what that basically means is that we are significantly reducing the amount of surface water runoff that leaves the development in an uncontrolled fashion, compared to having the attenuation basin and the flow control device, which controls the rate to a much lower rate.
Thank you very much. And so in layman's terms, is that better or worse for flooding downstream?
A significant improvement.
Thank you. And the 40% climate change element, what's that directed to?
So that is an additional allowance for the unknown quantity that is climate change. So historically, through my career, as things have evolved, we've had to store the 100-year, then it was 10%, then it was 20%, and so on. So we are currently storing an additional 40% water runoff from the scheme to account for unknowns and the unknown impact of climate change going forward.
Thank you very much. There was a point raised by a third party yesterday about the maintenance of attenuation basins and the prospect if they were to in some way fail, although quite how they were failing wasn't made explicit. Can you assist with that? How is that secured?
Sure. So recent updates to the Water Industry Act have meant that the water authorities are now and have been given specific responsibility for maintaining such features, as we would call SUDS features, so basins, ponds, swales, filter strips, all manner of interesting, wonderful features that previously would have been offered to management companies. And what that means is that essentially now the design of these features, basins in this instance, is far more stringent because the water authorities obviously will have a requirement to maintain them. So obviously they don't want to maintain them and they don't want to have to fix them if anything ever goes wrong. So, you know, the maintenance and the liability for these features will now be passed to the water authority, and in this instance, Wessex Water.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to foul drainage? That's 3.2. And you can probably just read 321 to 323, please.
Sure. There is an existing 300 millimetre adopted foul sewer running east to west immediately north of the site. Wessex Water have confirmed that developers can connect to the nearest public sewer on a size-for-size basis at their expense. Upon any grant of any planning, Wessex Water will have to review the sewer network and undertake any foul sewer capacity improvements we deem necessary to accommodate granted development. Sewers this close to the treatment works are serving a large upstream catchment and have limited capacity. Any necessary improvements are carried out at our expense and are funded through our infrastructure charging arrangements. Due to the topography of the site, the proposed foul drainage is to be split into two parts. The majority of the development to the south of the high point of the site is to be drained via gravity to a proposed adoptable foul pumping station. A rising main will then be laid within the adopted site roads to discharge into the gravity network serving the north part of the site via a break manhole. This will then drain via gravity with the remainder of the site to the existing foul sewer via a newly constructed manhole.
Thank you very much. Section 4 is entitled Response to Keep Wrington's Wrington Statement of Case Appendix 1. You identify at 4.1.1 that Appendix 1 made comments in respect of drainage, particularly to the north of the site. You have a series of headings to which you respond. So flooding, contamination of water systems is your first heading, and then you respond to that in the paragraphs that follow. Then flooding in half yard, and you respond to that by reference to the flood risk assessment, which again the inspector has got before him. Then the heading of pollution, and you respond to that in the following paragraphs. There's no observations in respect of Cox's Green and the extent to which it's comparable, which you respond to. And then a suggestion the applicant can't rely upon the previous inspector's judgment at Cox's Green, and again you respond to that in the paragraphs that follow. I won't ask you to read any of those, but just to go to your conclusions, please. 5.1 is the usual statement of truth. Just 5.2 to 5.5, please.
There are no objections to this planning application from the statutory drainage consultees. There are no reasons for refusals with regards to drainage and flooding. All third-party comments have been addressed. My professional view is that the scheme is acceptable and there are no reasons for dismissing the appeal on matters of drainage and flooding.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stuteley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Studley. Although I know, I think it might be worth you explaining. I mean, this term "suds" comes up a lot, and
Sure.
For we who deal with it, we know what it means. But I think for people who aren't familiar with it, could you just explain what that means? And I'm trying to find the section where it came up now, but there was reference somewhere in what you just read about the
Sure.
The SUDS hierarchy. So if you could just sort of talk us
3.1.6.
through that, please. Thank you.
Sure. So historically, surface water drainage was piped underground and taken to the nearest river, watercourse, sewer without any consideration for retention on site to get rid of it as quickly as possible. Over the years, that has obviously led to flooding issues. So in respect to that, more sustainable urban drainage systems, which is an acronym for SUDS, have been developed, worked on with many different authorities, consultants, all sorts of different people have been involved in the development of SUDS. And SUDS is a wide-ranging term for open attenuation features mainly. So it's detention basins which are wet when it rains and dry when it dries. Ponds with permanent water features, swales which are, basically V ditches or trapezoidal shaped ditches that convey water from one point to another in an open form. Filter drains are gravel-filled trenches that again provide potential for evaporation and cleaning of water at the same time. So not only does SUDS form a function of conveyance and attenuation and storing water before discharge, there is an increasing requirement for them now to provide water quality improvements as well. So by means of suitable planting and or for in a detention basin, in this example, we'd be looking to put some kind of forebay in before the outfall whereby it can help trap sediments and so on before discharge. So yes, SUDS are, for want of a better term, open features that you can see the water effectively, that treat and store.
Thank you. Mr. Storer, are there any questions that you had on behalf of the community?
I think the concern of the community is that and it was raised in the parish council objection about how this floodwater will be drained into an area that is already flooded. So that lower field, the southern field that had water standing in it and is obviously the first bit to flood, not necessarily from the river backing up, but just drainage. So yes, perhaps you could just clarify that for everybody who's concerned. Sure.
So that southern section, in its existing format, when the ground is saturated, the rate and the volume of water that is generated from the existing field, obviously contributes to the flood that the flooding that you'll see, and the flooding that you'll see on the flood maps. Obviously, by collecting all that water with the hard surfaces that are going to be provided, storing that water and then releasing it at a much reduced rate, the actual contribution to the flooding from the actual development will be lessened significantly by the factor of whatever the difference between the 100-year and the QBAR rate, more than half. The attenuation isn't necessarily that proportional, but there is a significant improvement in the water generated by the site currently than is proposed.
And so by doing that, just so that everyone can understand, and maybe I understand, it will stop the river backing up and flooding half yard, which it currently
That
does?
won't be anything to do with the development. The development will contribute less to the flooding, but there are obviously other issues at play there that obviously we're not party to as part of this this development.
You're certain, you know, and obviously this is where what people are concerned about, that it will possibly get better, but certainly get no worse.
No, I mean, it certainly won't get worse. You know, the volume and the retention of the water on the site, hence why we have the detention basin and the underground storage tanks upstream of those, will certainly not exacerbate the issue and will help. Obviously, the volume of water that you're talking about with regards to the flooding is a significant volume, of which the site is only a very small portion in its current format, so it will be less in its new arrangement.
And if, from your calculations, I think you were referring to open attenuation.
Sure.
You've referred to swales, which
Yep.
are a V-ditch. So just sort of how large would does your calculation show that V-ditch will be, bearing in mind it's shown as a sort of water feature almost along that southern boundary?
Sure. So to give this feature its proper designation in the hierarchy of SUDS, it's actually a detention basin. I was just quoting swales as another form of SUDS feature that can be used on development. But in this instance, this is actually a detention basin. In order for it to qualify as a detention basin, it has a restricted outflow downstream after it's collected all the attenuation, all the water that flows to it from the underground pipe network. And then obviously the water then backs up into that detention basin to a certain level. That level is calculated, gives a particular volume, and then from there are other considerations that we need to take into account with regards to offering it to the Water Authority for adoption and what have you. But essentially this one is a detention basin.
I only mentioned swale because I thought that was what was mentioned on the landscape map.
Yes, so I think there was some discussion through the process of a swale or a feature along the western boundary. That predominantly was discussed just from a purely emergency issue, if anything ever was to overtop anywhere, that the swale protected the field to the left. In terms of the formal drainage design and the formal drainage network, that swale doesn't contribute to the design that would be taken forward in regards to the surface water flows and attenuation.
I think you've slightly lost me. I'm just now trying to open up the map. I didn't think I would need this, the landscape map. But so where it says swale across it, from my memory, that will be a V-ditch that's in addition to your open attenuation basin.
I mean,
right?
the drainage strategy that we've produced, that I have in front of me, I'm not showing a swale on it. I just know from previous discussions that there was talk of some kind of swale to provide some additional level of protection to the existing field that will remain to the west. But in terms of the formal drainage that I would term as, I know, all the hard standing runoff, no swale is included in that. I might have missed it as well. Did you actually say how big the water attenuation basin was going to be? Now you're asking me to remember the volume exactly. I'd have to go back through our calculations to work that out. But essentially what we've done on this application is we've actually put more effort into the outline, effort's the wrong term, we put more detail into this strategy that we've put forward on the basis of the sensitivity of the scheme. So the actual detention basin that we're showing on the plan has actually been modelled in more detail than would normally be required for an outline application. I can't tell you the volume off the top of my head without going through our calculations, but that volume that system has actually been modelled with a lot more detail than is normally required for this stage.
I wonder, would it help if you gave the drawing number?
Oh, sorry, yeah. It's our drawing number 001 07 CP 0200.
And the revision?
Revision C.
Revision C. I've got revision B in the,
Okay, fine.
in the core docs. Has it moved on since revision B?
I mean, I think it was a nominal change just to do with a layout update issue. It's not, the drainage didn't fundamentally change between B and C.
So if it helps for Mr. Studley, forgive me, for Mr. Storer, core document C5.16 is the revision B drainage strategy, and that'll show the detention basin, and obviously we can provide revision B as revision C as well.
Yeah. Would you like the notation on the revision to just explain where we got to, what the difference between B and C?
If that helps, yes, certainly.
Just to clarify, the change was on the basis of, and it's very small text, so I'll have to hold it up, amended in the northeast and southeast areas of the site to improve views to the North Church. So there was nothing fundamentally changed on the drainage.
So the...
Forgive me, sorry to interrupt again. I told it's D17. Yes, I just missed it. It's core document D17 is the one that the witness is referring to. So if Mr. Studley, if Mr. Storer wants to look at that, that's where it is. CD D17.
backtrack slightly then.
So that's the revision C, is it? Yeah.
It's just force of habit to print out the latest revision, sorry.
D, sorry, what's the number? Sorry, I missed that one.
D17.
Oh, yes, 17, thank you. And and so from, let's get this right. So you've got the water attenuation basin, and do you know roughly? I'm sort of just being slightly picky, I suppose, about how big this is because of what people have seen on the other sites that sort of seems to have got larger and larger. So I think that's another concern. People are just how big that's going to be.
The basin itself on this plan it shouldn't change in size in terms of making itself bigger, usually through the planning process. As you can see, the plan itself is obviously more of a hand-drawn sketch, so there is an element of extra over area assumed that's being drained. So if anything, the basin will get ever so slightly smaller when it's made more efficient with a full drainage design.
I have, full confidence in that the council will make sure that it's big enough. As I say, I think the reason why people have concerns is because flooding is such an issue.
Sure.
And as everyone knows, once you get flooded, it's a nightmare. So we have the blue attenuation on there, and then as I understood it, the swales were going on this sort of grey stretch that's also got some landscaping. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, so like I explained earlier, that swell is there as a protection measure for any exceedance events that might happen, and by that I mean in the unlikely event that, let's say, all the gullies on a road are blocked for whatever reason, the water may overtop. And again, this is something that we get asked to think about during the planning process, and typically the reserve matters process or a full application. But that swale has been included in that landscape buffer just as an additional level of protection for the field to the right, to the left, sorry.
And the sort of cutout, the red cutout, is where you anticipate the majority of water would be. I'm not quite sure why the red cutout is there on this map.
Sorry, the
red cutout that shows the extent of the development.
Sure.
Is that where you're anticipating the sort of flood water would then filter down to the Yeo?
So the flood extent of the Yeo is shown in the FRA in one of the appendices, which coincides with the hedge line, which forms the southern boundary of the development area. So the detention basin is above the flood level.
Yes, I understand that bit. I was really just sort of trying to reference this, the red cutout in relation to your flood plans.
Do you mean the extension of the red line boundary down to the Yeo?
Yeah, I'm
do.
struggling with this term red cutout, Mr. Storer. What?
I do apologise. Sorry, I was...
No, so please don't apologise. It's just just as long as we understand what each of us is saying, and I'm not, I'm afraid. It's probably the hour. I don't know.
It's the red cutout into the landscape, maybe, or the rest of the thing. The southernmost boundary.
Sure.
Sorry, I should put it better.
That sort of projection down to the river.
The extra bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the purpose for that, for other reasons I can't elaborate on, but from a drainage point of view, obviously we have an outfall to that river, so we need to include that outfall within the application boundary.
That makes much more sense and has explained it. I do accept what you're saying, and that's fine. Thank you very much.
Was that everything you had, Mr. Storer?
Yes, sorry. So yes, I think I do accept that we haven't got all the facts and figures, but I'm sure those will be sorted out if need be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Stoodley. I didn't have anything else. I think that brings us to a close for the day. Are there any housekeeping points?
A housekeeping point. The long-promised easements have now been signed. I'm told they're sitting behind me. So if you're happy to accept them this evening, I can give them to you and circulate them, copies thereof.
Yeah, if they're available now, yes, please.
Did you overhear that? So you can have one hard copy and then circulated electronically.
Let's do it all in one hit. We'll
do it.
I don't want anybody to get ahead of anybody else.
Okay.
So let's do it tomorrow morning.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're making headway. Tomorrow, I think we've done so much juggling of witnesses. I think we're on to Mr. Reynolds, your last witness.
Yes, sir, we are.
That's a relief. In terms of me knowing where I'm up to,
Yes.
I'm sure it'll be a relief for Mr. Reynolds. He's been sort of probably thought he would have been done and dusted 2 days ago, if not more.
Sitting patiently, sir.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your patience. Thank you very much. But I mean, given the circumstances, it was absolutely the right thing to do. And we'll also hear from your heritage witness tomorrow as well. Excellent. And that would leave us with 2 witnesses, both of whom are not available tomorrow. Is there an update on Mr. Jones?
So I'll come to that in a second, if I may. So my working expectation is that we will have Mr. Reynolds and Miss Armstrong both on and off tomorrow. Is that shared?
That is certainly my hope and expectation.
I mean, for reasons which I think might have become apparent, I don't anticipate heritage taking very long, so we still shouldn't be dragging into the afternoon too long into the afternoon of a Friday. So that's those 2 witnesses. Yes, Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones has been, if I can respectfully put this, up and down with his health. We still have a colleague of his on standby. My sequential preference will be as follows. Firstly, if he's well, he will come here in person and give evidence on Tuesday. Secondly, if he is well enough to give evidence but wouldn't like to travel, I'm told by the authority very kindly that they can patch him in by Teams with all these wonderful screens. We can therefore conduct it in a sort of quasi-virtual way. I prefer that because, of course, he is the author of the document, but that is subject to him feeling mentally as well as physically up to doing so. And my third preference then is to have his colleague to come in, speak to his proof, and he will do that, if necessary, orally. And he will be able to answer such questions as are being put. It's a matter obviously for qua as opposed to authority in terms of cross-examination, because you know the position as far as the authority is concerned. So that's the highways evidence, transportation evidence, which will start presumably first thing at 10 on the Tuesday, and then we'll proceed directly with Mr. Marsh. And again, I would expect to be finished, therefore, in good time with the live evidence, such that we should be able to do 106 and conditions in the same day, and then we would close in writing on the following day.
Yep, that's what I had in mind. So let's not tempt fate by talking too much about it, but it's it all sounds feasible, and hopefully Mr. Jones will be able to join us, and hopefully we'll have an update tomorrow. It'd be useful to have just keep the communication going. Obviously, we don't know how he's going to feel next week, but fingers crossed he'll be fine and be able to join us. But
So we won't in fact make a decision until the Monday, because all sorts of things can happen over the weekend. He may be right as rain.
yeah, I think we've understood, and the important thing is just to keep the communication going so everybody understands what we can look forward to on Tuesday. But we've got, if he's not able to join us, we've got two contingencies, which both of which seem reasonable to me. Okay. Is there anything else before we adjourn for the day? No? Well,
No, sir. I was just wondering slightly. There's presumably, it's a matter for a learned friend, nothing that we can fit in tomorrow. I mean, it looks unlikely, I confess, but I raise it in the hope of shortening things generally.
Well, perfectly fair point, but I think actually 2 witnesses on a Friday is as much as the human frame can stand.
well, let's see how we get on. You never know. If I'm able to, I'll give some feedback on conditions, and we might give those an airing to try and streamline things on Tuesday. Not a full-blown condition session, but if I might flag a few things. Let's put it that way. Okay, we will adjourn now, and we'll resume again here at 9:30. Thank you all.